If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 61, Silent Night. Cyrus was injured more seriously than he thought. According to Madame Pomfrey's original words, this arm is more crushed than the tea leaves in the divination class. To translate, it's like dry noodles that have been pinched for more than 10 minutes. Ginny and Hermione originally planned to come over to visit him immediately but were stopped by Harry and Ron. They didn't want to be crowded with so many Slytherins. I think you're overly worried, Ginny. Don't forget, it's Malfoy who's injured, not. Ron raised his eyebrows. Ginny reacted immediately. Yes, Malfoy is injured, what does it have to do with Mr. Riddle? Now, Ginny and Hermione were not in a hurry. It was Malfoy who was unlucky anyway, so what did it matter? If Mr. Riddle hadn't taken control of the other's body now, they would have even wanted to set off fireworks to celebrate. But he flies really well. If Slytherin returns to the finals, what will you do? Ron was a little worried. Don't worry, he's not going to fight a second time, Ginny said. She knew that Mr. Riddle was just there to experience Quidditch, not that he really liked Quidditch. Harry was relieved at first, but then felt a strong sense of frustration. Just thinking about competing with him as an opponent makes me flinch a little. The feeling of being completely defeated in a field that I thought I was good at is not good at all. Afterward, they waited for the Slytherin players to leave the Madam's office before going to visit Cyrus, but they left quickly. However, the next person who visited Cyrus was beyond Cyrus' expectations. Are you okay? Cho Chang walked in with some food. Cyrus glanced at the food and saw it was pumpkin pie. I just met Diggory of Hufflepuff, and he gave me some pumpkin pie. I thought you probably didn't eat anything, so I brought it with me. Cho Chang explained. She looked very shy, completely different from what she looks like on the field. Thank you, I happen to be a little hungry. Cyrus happily picked up the pumpkin pie and ate it. He had eaten breakfast a little hastily, and had done strenuous exercise, so he was already hungry. But when Harry or the people from the Slytherin team came to see him, no one came with food. There's nothing serious about the hand. Madame Pomfrey said it will be fully recovered by the evening. That's good. Cho Chang was silent for a while. You flew so well today, and that sloth rolled around the tree, it was so exciting. No one can last that long and still keep up with my actions. Consistent. Thank you, Cyrus responded as he ate. However, he obviously felt that the atmosphere was a bit awkward. This cute girl was squirming, which made him become squirmy too. After a while, Cho Chang finally plucked up the courage and said forcefully, "Can you give me an autograph?" What? My autograph? Cyrus did not expect that the other party would actually make such a request. Has his identity as the Dark Lord been exposed? No, the Dark Lord has a fart admirer. Even if there is one, it must be a little Slytherin wizard with an evil nature. You're a Ravenclaw or a member of the DA, why are you here to join in the fun? I think you might become a great Quidditch player in the future. So, it would be great if I could get your autograph in advance. Cho Chang said with a blush. She was still a little shy, but after saying some words, she found that it was not that difficult. Which team will you join? The Chudley Cannons have not performed well. What about the Irish team? Sorry. Cyrus interrupted her, I didn't plan to become a Quidditch star. Oh, Cho Chang paused, then laughed, it's understandable, but it's a pity. You are really talented, very different from your last competition. To be honest, I was a little bit contemptuous at first. What about you? I didn't expect you to progress so quickly. Cyrus frowned. Is this progress? This is a call for help. Draco Malfoy will still be as bad as he was in his last semester's game. Well, I can't say it's bad, but it's certainly not on Harry's level. In fact, Malfoy is still talented. The problem is that he has always been pampered and cannot bear the hardship. Even if Cyrus wasn't in control of the body, it would be difficult for him to keep training. Although he has never participated in Quidditch training, Cyrus still encouraged, as long as you train hard, you can do it. Thank you. Cho Chang stood up, I have to go. I wish you a speedy recovery. She walked to the door and turned to look at Cyrus, I think you are very different from what others said, goodbye. She closed the door to the school infirmary, leaving Cyrus with a ridiculous expression on his face, holding a half-eaten pumpkin pie and lost in thought. This little girl isn't obsessed with me, no, she isn't obsessed with Draco, right? But soon he shook his head. Probably not. After all, we just met once. Maybe she just admired me because I played very well. He stuffed the pumpkin pie into his mouth and changed his position to lie down. But if Draco is smarter, it is not impossible to develop a relationship with Cho Chang according to the current situation. Cyrus would be very sad when he thought about Harry seeing his goddess being with the enemy in the future. But it's a pity that Draco Malfoy only has his eyes on Harry, so how can he have time to look at other women? Cyrus chuckled and stayed alone in the school doctor's office for several hours. It was completely dark outside. Madame Pomfrey came out from behind the curtain, bent down, and squeezed his arm. After confirming that there was nothing wrong, she let Cyrus leave the office. When he walked out of the school hospital wing, there was no one in the corridor. Cyrus avoided the portrait's gaze and took out the Marauder's map. I solemnly swear that I'm up to no good. The blank parchment opened automatically, and lines emerged, drawing a multifaceted map. Except for some unknown secret rooms, every corner of the castle is fully presented. He saw a lot of little badgers wandering around in the kitchen, and there were almost no little wizards wandering around in other places in the castle. On days like this, even the most energetic Gryffindor would not dare to walk around at night, lest he encounter that terrible air and eventually be killed. It will be harder to launch attacks in the future. Cyrus shook his head, put the map away, and turned towards the room of requirement. Let's continue studying alchemy. Chapter 62, Cram School. Early the next morning, when Cyrus was sitting sleepily on Slytherin's long table eating breakfast, an owl with a letter flew in front of him. Cyrus took the letter, fed the owl some food, and immediately opened the letter. The letter was sent by Lucius and Narcissa. On the surface, it seemed to be just an ordinary letter expressing their concern and greetings for their son. But Cyrus saw the secret message left in the letter at a glance. After casting a secret revealing spell, the real content disappeared in a flash. Lucius had convinced the other school governors to have Dumbledore leave the school as soon as the next victim appeared. He also did some mobilization on the Ministry of Magic, ensuring that Hagrid could be sent to Azkaban for a few days. Cyrus was excited inside, but on the outside, he remained calm, as if he were reading an ordinary letter. Silently he folded the letter and put it back inside his sleeve. The two little followers sitting next to him seemed to want to talk to him, but considering that Malfoy seemed to be a different person during this period, they did not dare to say anything. What's wrong? Cyrus glared at them in a Malfoy-only arrogant manner. No, it's nothing. I'm done eating. Goodbye. Cyrus stood up alone and walked through the dining table full of people. Many people greeted him, but he ignored them all. Instead, he was thinking about when to launch the next decisive attack. Right now? Or should we wait a little longer? I still have no clue about refining the Philosopher's Stone, and I'm not ready to confront Dumbledore. Cyrus was most worried about Dumbledore. But if the plan goes well, he won't face Dumbledore. We can't make any more mistakes next. The Christmas accident really caught him off guard, but fortunately it was nothing bad. Cyrus thought about it carefully and decided to continue according to the development of the original work. The next attack will be on the day of the Quidditch match between Gryffindor and Hufflepuff, and the target of the attack is naturally. What mistakes are we talking about? A voice suddenly interrupted Cyrus's thoughts. He looked up and saw Lockhart with a smile on his face. Haha, I guess you must be talking about the next Quidditch match, right? Lockhart showed a self-satisfied expression and then started bragging regardless of Cyrus's feelings. You were in the limelight yesterday, and you did a great job. I have to say, you did almost half as well as I did. Didn't I mention that I was also a seeker on the school team when I was a student? Winclaw team. To be honest, if your opponent was half as talented as me, then you may not have won so easily. And your hand is recovering well. You know, I could have cured you right away. Professor, what do you want? Cyrus interrupted Lockhart's sterile speech. He was not interested in listening to this guy bragging. I think I can give you a little help in Quidditch. If you plan to join a world-famous team in the future, then you'd better listen to my opinion. Lockhart said proudly, back then I received letters from many teams, but unfortunately, that was not my ambition, so I turned them down. Ha! The Quidditch world has lost a rising star. No need, Professor, actually I'm not that interested in Quidditch either. And I don't intend to become a star showing off. He almost understood what Lockhart was thinking. The other party obviously took a fancy to his Quidditch talent and planned to make him his student. In this way, if Malfoy became a great player in the future, he would naturally be praised as Malfoy's mentor and become more famous. Unfortunately, Cyrus wasn't interested. Not only did he have no interest, but Malfoy himself had no interest. Don't like Quidditch? You are wasting your talent, Malfoy. After all, not everyone is as good as me. Even if you leave Quidditch aside, you can make achievements in many aspects. And I am still a third-level Merlin. The owner of the medal. I'm sorry, Professor, you just need to donate some money to the Ministry of Magic for that kind of thing. You can have as much as you want. Cyrus said unceremoniously, and Professor, maybe your memory is not very good, but have you forgotten my name? My name is Draco Malfoy. Quidditch talent aside, I still have a lot of business to do and a lot of money to inherit. After saying that, he turned his body sideways and walked away from the other party regardless of Lockhart's expression. After evading Lockhart, Ginny and the four of them caught up again. Why are you here? We saw that you came out after receiving a letter, so we followed you. It's just a letter for Malfoy. I plan to put it away for him. What's the matter? I just saw Lockhart talking to you. What was he saying? Ron glanced at Hermione first, and then asked, I guess he must be bragging again. Is he planning to teach you how to play Quidditch? You really know him, Ron? Cyrus said with a hint of admiration. He also said that he was a genius seeker back then. I've seen through him a long time ago. Ron was very happy that he guessed correctly, which made Hermione a little unhappy. Professor Lockhart was actually Ravenclaw seeker. But you know I worked in the medal room and Ravenclaw never won a Quidditch trophy during his time at school. Come on Hermione, he's just terrible at it. Much worse than Malfoy. Ron said provocatively. But surprisingly, Hermione just snorted and didn't respond. By the way, do you have any better suggestions for selecting courses for the third year? After a while, Hermione seemed to remember something and turned around to ask. After the Easter vacation, the professors of each house could not handle course selection. Hermione took this very seriously, while Harry and Ron were very casual. But it would be good for both of them if they could listen to Mr. Riddle's opinion, at least they wouldn't need to use their brains. In general, the care of magical creatures course is very important, but I heard that Professor Sylvanus Kettleben is retiring next year, and I don't know who will take over this course. Of the two divination courses, I only recommend arithmetic divination, and the other one, how should I say, does require a bit of talent. There are also ancient magic texts that are more referenced, and for the others, I also recommend alchemy. Or if you don't want to miss out, you can choose them all. Cyrus said. I just want to give up potions class, Harry said frustratedly. Potions are very important, Harry. Even if you don't plan to be an Auror in the future, knowing more about potions can prevent you from being poisoned by others. But I can't think of anyone other than Snape who would try to poison me. Of course, there are, such as those Death Eaters. Don't forget they are the subordinate of Voldemort. Cyrus saw Ron shudder. I beg you not to say that name, especially since he is still alive. Well, in short, the only course I don't recommend you to take is Muggle Studies. It's not that that course is unimportant, but the content of the school is just nonsense. But it's understandable. After all, wizards sometimes find it difficult to understand Muggle technology. As for other courses, you can ask the senior students. After so many years, maybe the teaching content has changed between now and my time. In the end, Cyrus chose alchemy, ancient runes, and care of magical creatures for Malfoy. As for Hermione, she only heard Cyrus say that she could select all subjects, and she immediately marked all the subjects. Do I have too many subjects to learn? Can you help me with tutoring now? Hermione pestered Cyrus. Teaching? You haven't finished studying the second year yet, and you plan to take up the third year's content. Ron looked like he was crazy. You have to know that he hasn't even started reviewing the content of the final exam. What's wrong? I advise you two to prepare early. After all, this will affect our entire future. Hermione glared at him and dragged Cyrus to the library. Ron and Harry looked at each other, both feeling that what Hermione said was a bit too exaggerated. When Ginny saw Hermione starting to study with Cyrus, she was not far behind. She borrowed a second year's textbook and asked around Cyrus. Cyrus also told them an extra head-soaking spell. They made some progress and chatted a lot and used spells. In the end, they were kicked out by an annoyed Mrs. Pants. Chapter 63, make Voldemort great again. At night, Cyrus left the dormitory again, avoided all eyes and came to the room of requirement. The blood-red potion kept rolling, exuding a strong breath of life. But soon the content of potion turned into poison, turning an unhealthy red color like rusty iron. Cyrus immediately knew that the potion was useless again. There were not many potions ingredients left that he had stolen from Snape. Come on, Cyrus. If you fail again, you will have to give up on this. Cyrus opened the alchemy books again. The seemingly simple patterns and words have become the most profound and difficult to understand wisdom. Wisdom, it would be great if Ravenclaw's diadem had not been made into a horcrux. Cyrus sighed and scolded Voldemort for wasting everything. Such a powerful treasure was destroyed by him. If the crown works, maybe I can use the wisdom of the crown to refine the magic stone. TCH. Who said you can't kill someone without a gun? Cyrus suddenly reacted. No one has ever said that the crown cannot be used after it is made into a horcrux, right? Maybe others can't use it because Voldemort's soul fragment is attached to it, but he is different. He doesn't have to worry about Voldemort's soul lodged in the horcrux at all. It's better to say, I am Riddle. There was a bright light in Cyrus's black eyes. Cyrus had always had flexible standards regarding whether he was Riddle or not. He quickly walked out of the room of requirement, and then walked back and forth 3 more times, thinking silently. I want a hiding room, I want a hiding room, I want a hiding room. Then, the original door slowly disappeared, and a new door appeared on the wall. Cyrus pushed open the black, luxurious door and walked into a huge, but very crowded and messy room. All kinds of clutter are piled up together, making it look like a utility room filled with garbage. It is hard to imagine how the very few people who knew this room in the 1,000 years since Hogwarts was founded had turned this room into this. Cyrus knew where the horcruxes were. He had been to this room before. At that time, he was just looking for some alchemy tools for Draco to practice, and he was just looking for the crown by the way. He passed the troll specimen and the broken disappearing cabinet, and came to a crate. Above the crate was a bust of a wizard covered in pockmarks, wearing a dusty old hair cap. There is also an old faded crown-like thing. The crown is inlaid with gems and engraved with a line of text, "Extraordinary wisdom is the greatest wealth." It should have been sparkling, but now, the crown looked a little dull. Then, Cyrus put it on his head without hesitation. For a moment, he felt like he was in a quiet morning forest, and the cool mountain breeze made his brain very clear. It felt like a rusty machine was suddenly greased with oil and started to run quickly. Cyrus felt as if he was enveloped by wisdom itself. However, if someone looked at him from a third perspective, they would find that what enveloped Cyrus was not wisdom, but an evil black energy. Voldemort! Show me your soul! The black air made a hoarse and terrifying sound, echoing in Cyrus's mind. I will show you all the secrets of magic. Stop howling, it's me. Cyrus took the initiative to interrupt him. He opened up half of his thoughts, absorbed Malfoy's life force, and condensed an illusory shadow. At the same time, the diary was also held in his hand. You. Cyrus believed that no one would ever see the legendary Dark Lord look more comical than at this moment. It's me, and of course it's you. Cyrus looked directly at the ugly snake face that emerged from the black mist, and felt better for no reason. Although I had to think about how to be resurrected as soon as I traveled through Dimensions, at least I didn't become as ugly as the guy in the crown. I gave the diary to Lucius Malfoy for safekeeping. Yes, but we didn't tell him what was in the diary, otherwise he would have respected me more. Cyrus had an angry look on his face, but this is better, at least being like this let me know some surprising news. I guess you never dreamed. What? The invincible Dark Lord was defeated by a baby. Then he turned into a despicable thing that was worse than a ghost. He lingered in the bodies of rats in the sewers all day long. The black figure seemed to be irritated by Cyrus's words. Like a poisonous snake, it bared its fangs and spat out a message. You are lying. Lying? Why should I deceive myself? Cyrus openly revealed his eyes. He had prepared a modified false memory, but he overestimated the remnant soul trapped in the horcrux. The other party can't cast any magic at all. You should really go outside and see what this world has become. We have lost. He looked angrily, as if he was angry and ashamed of his failure. Acting like now that he saw another self, he could finally let go of his depression. The emotions were released. People were chanting "The boy who lived to celebrate our defeat." And last year, the boy stopped our plans again. Cyrus told everything that happened during the year, including Voldemort possessing Quirrell in an attempt to steal the Philosopher's Stone to resurrect himself, but was defeated by Harry Potter, including Lucius. In order to avoid being traced by the Ministry of Magic, Malfoy sent the diary away, hoping to cause chaos in Hogwarts. Now, I am possessing Malfoy and attacking several despicable mudbloods with the basilisk in the secret room, but this is not enough. We must be resurrected. Cyrus became more and more excited as he spoke, and he kept asking the other self. The soul in the crown approached. This is easy, but are the horcruxes safe? Horcruxes are safe enough. If the plan goes well, we can have 6 horcruxes. Cyrus said. Yes. It seems the plan was good. It was a good insurance if we ever got defeated. At least we are still alive. Voldemort was now proud of his plan to split 7 souls. He was confident that no one would know that he had made so many horcruxes. Not to mention finding the location of every horcrux and destroying them. Insurance. Cyrus sneered, is insurance just about being in the dirty sewers with snakes and rats? Don't forget who we are. Don't forget that we changed our names to Voldemort just so that one day, when we become the greatest magician in the world, wizards everywhere dare not say this name easily. Instead of lying in the putrid ditch like a wild dog with its legs broken. We must have stronger power and safer means to fight against Dumbledore, and that Cyrus pressed his hand on the crown, hatred flashed in his eyes, the boy who lived. Are you planning to abandon your true form? Voldemort in the crown suddenly understood what Cyrus meant. But this made him feel even more incredible. He had never thought that the other party was so crazy. My true form. Who are we to think about these trivial true forms? Cyrus's mood seemed to have calmed down, but this calmness contained a more powerful force, like the silent currents on the bottom of the sea. There is only one Voldemort in this world. It's him, it's you, and it's me. Since he loses, let me do it. If I lose, it will be you. Facing the tempting devil, Cyrus's trick is to seduce the other party was working. The soul in the crown seemed to have compromised. Cyrus put the crown on his head, and said the last words that broke the opponent's psychological defense. Chapter 64, Life for a Life. The black energy disappeared, and the soul with Voldemort's face returned to the crown. Cyrus knew that his plan had succeeded, that he had almost deceived Voldemort himself. Of course, this is actually very easy. After all, his existence means that he himself is a horcrux. No matter how cautious Voldemort was, he probably wouldn't have thought that his horcrux would be taken away from him. As for Cyrus, he didn't have to go to so much trouble, but he didn't intend to use a good thing like the crown just once. Naturally, one must be cautious when accompanying Voldemort. At least while the crown is still on his head, he must be Riddle. Fortunately, Tom Riddle's occlumency is still very powerful. Even Dumbledore couldn't see through his mind back then. Cyrus has absorbed all of Riddle's magical knowledge, and he will naturally not slack off when it comes to useful magic like occlumency. Cyrus didn't go anywhere and opened the Jewish Book of Abraham directly on the spot. This is a copper book with only 21 pages in total. Only every 7th page is marked with a page number, and the page numbers are also distributed 7-page no 3 times. In alchemy, 3 and 7 are both very special numbers. Among them, 3 may represent triple greatness, that is, repeating greatness 3 times. Perhaps this means that a certain element needs to be sublimated 3 times. There is no doubt that this element is mercury. But that alone is obviously not enough. Cyrus previously tried to reach the perfect world with 3 pillars, 10 essences, 4 worlds, and 22 paths, but ultimately failed. Is there something missing? Whatever it is, it's a very crucial point. He looked at several pictures imprinted on the book. 2 intertwined snakes, one being swallowed by the other, represented the fusion of matter. The second picture, a snake nailed to a cross. The third picture, a desert. The snakes gushing out of the spring in the middle. What does the snake mean? Is it mystery, taboo, or immortality itself? The shed snake skin symbolizes the decayed body. Is what is born from it a new life? This constant alternation, over and over again, leads to eternal life. Like a basilisk, it has existed for nearly 1,000 years, but is still far away from death. Maybe he should add something snake-related to the potion, such as the basilisk snake slough? On the road leading to the secret room, there is a huge basilisk snake slough. The basilisk itself is a product of magic. Its snake slough also has many effects. It has extremely powerful magic resistance and can be used to make armor. However, the most important thing is that the snake slough has always been a symbol of immortality and rebirth. What if the snake slough of the basilisk is added to the process of making the philosopher's stone? Add snake slough? Do you really think that you can refine a unique magic stone? The soul in the crown laughed. I don't know when you were so naive. If I hadn't watched you being made with my own eyes, I'm afraid I'll have to wonder if you are actually me. What do you mean? Cyrus felt a sudden thought and asked in a deep voice. But Voldemort didn't actually have any suspicion, he just thought it was a bit funny. To actually interpret the contents of those pictures as snake shedding is simply an insult to the Dark Lord's reputation. Or is it because I was too young when I made the horcrux of the diary, so the other person's soul was too naive? You actually ask me what I mean? The snakes devouring each other, the snakes nailed to the cross, the man who raised an iron axe to chop at the feet of Hermes, the Holy Grail carrying countless blood, the slaughtered babies. Voldemort recited the bloody pictures word for word, especially the last picture, where a king holding a broadsword was ordering soldiers to kill many babies. The mothers of the babies knelt in front of them and begged. Next to them were some similar figures. Containers of barrels and cauldrons in which the blood of infants was collected, in which the sun and moon bathed. Tell me. If you want eternal life, what's the price? On the scale of life, what can be measured against it? Voldemort's voice was like the terrifying ghost king in hell, asking the deepest questions about Cyrus' soul. It was as if he was holding a hammer and driving the sharpest nails into the place where Cyrus had never dared to look directly, causing blood to drip from his eyes. And there is only one answer. Only life. The price of life can only be life. This is actually something Cyrus has already understood. If he wants to be resurrected, he must absorb a person's life force. Only when the life of the person possessed by him is completely drained, can he have the ability to affect reality. In fact, the same is true for the production of horcruxes. Kill an innocent soul and forge a horcrux. This is the true equivalent exchange. If alchemy is a scale, then if life is placed on one end of the scale, the other end must also be measured with life. Voldemort was already familiar with this. In order to make horcruxes, he killed too many people. Life is an exchange. It has been like this since ancient times. Eagles kill rabbits, snakes hunt mice, ligers hunt cattle and sheep. Only when others die can you live. But for Cyrus, he was trying his best to avoid killing any innocent life during his resurrection, so he sought other methods to try to recreate the Philosopher's Stone. However, the more he studied, the more he found that life was not an acceptable price. If this is the case, then everything he does will lose its meaning, so subconsciously he is not willing to think about it in this aspect. However, Voldemort eventually pierced this layer of window paper ruthlessly. At the same time, it also made Cyrus face the real truth. Magic itself is an idealistic power. Sometimes if you want to achieve something, you don't care about spells, wands, or complicated rituals. You just need spiritual desire. On the other hand, if you are deceiving yourself, how can you succeed in refining the magic stone? If you want to refine the magic stone, you must pour it with the blood of something, otherwise you will never succeed. But Nicholas Flamel, do you really think he is a person who can do such a bloody thing? Cyrus asked. People of his time. Voldemort just snorted. It was obvious that he did not understand all the goodness in this world. He might think that all kindness and justice are false, and the truth hidden under lies and deception will always be dripping with blood. Voldemort's views are naturally paranoid, but that also means he's not entirely wrong. Yes. Nicholas Flamel lived for more than 600 years. Who knows what his time was like at that time? The further time goes forward, the more bloody and cruel civilization becomes, and this is the same even in the magical world. 600 years ago, even black magic was probably just ordinary magic in the eyes of people at that time. What's more, judging from the fact that Nico has not been able to carve the Philosopher's Stone for so many years, perhaps this exchange of lives was something he himself did not notice. You think so? Voldemort asked. I would prefer that he knew, but when it came time to try again, the prophecy was lost. Voldemort did not think that Nicholas Flamel was an innocent person. How could a master of alchemy fail to notice such an obvious exchange of equivalents? Besides, refining the magic stone requires more than a little blood. It is said that at a certain period, Nicholas Flamel hunted a large number of dark wizards. It is unknown whether this is true or not. But if it is true, then he is probably preparing to refine the magic stone. The Jewish Book of Abraham once revealed part of its secrets to Nicholas Flamel, but after Nico successfully refined the Philosopher's Stone, that revelation disappeared. If so, how do we find this revelation? Looking for it? No. When this book is in our hands, the revelation will be completed," said the Soul in the Crown. Chapter 65, Sense of Guilt. The revelation is complete. The Jewish Book of Abraham is a magical book. When it fell into the hands of Cyrus, it was already destined that he would be the next person to refine the Philosopher's Stone. Voldemort in the Crown thought that this person was himself, so he was very proud. Not only he was Slytherin's heir, but fate also favored him. But Cyrus knew that all this had nothing to do with Voldemort. Voldemort couldn't get Nicholas Flamel's Philosopher's Stone, let alone refine the real Philosopher's Stone. But he also knew that if he exchanged the lives of those evil dark wizards, he would not feel guilty at all. But now that he has possessed Draco Malfoy, where can he find so many dark wizards? But if it were to cost the lives of those innocent little wizards in the castle, Cyrus couldn't do it. A person may be cruel, but at least he should leave a bottom line, not for anything else, but to prevent himself from becoming a devil in human skin. Voldemort probably misunderstood him, thinking that he was worried that sacrificing so many lives in the castle would trigger Dumbledore's revenge. Our current situation cannot be too public, but don't forget that there are still many lives in the Forbidden Forest. Forbidden Forest. The surging Acromantula clan flashed through Cyrus's mind. Acromantulas like to eat people very much, especially after Aragog, who was raised by Hagrid, died, the spider swarm completely lost control, and finally fell to Voldemort's side. If the lives of these things were used as sacrifices, Cyrus would feel no guilt. It seems like we have to go to the Forbidden Forest. Cyrus took off the crown on his head. In an instant, he felt that his ears were much quieter, and he felt comfortable without Voldemort chattering beside him. But this time he really wanted to thank Voldemort. He didn't see whether the crown could improve a person's wisdom, but Voldemort was indeed one of the most terrifying geniuses in the wizarding world. Of course, perhaps there is indeed a crown at play. Cyrus put the crown away and left the room of requirement with it. Now that Lucius Malfoy is ready, it's almost time to bring the plan to a close. In an empty classroom, Hermione sat at a desk and waved to Cyrus. There is also a pile of books on the table. "Hey, you're finally here." Since the last time they were kicked out of the library by Mrs. Pants, they had to change their tutoring place. Fortunately, there are many abandoned classrooms in Hogwarts, so I found one at random. Why aren't Ginny and the others here? Cyrus found it a little strange that Hermione was the only one here. Normally, Harry and Ron rarely come here, and the study content this semester alone is enough to give them a headache. But Ginny usually never fails. "You forgot, she has classes today." Hermione shook her head happily, her fluffy brown curly hair trembling, looking very cute. If her front teeth weren't so big that she looked like an otter when she smiles, Cyrus believes more people would notice her beauty. As for Harry, he is about to start playing against the Hufflepuff team at the weekend. Wood is barely giving him a chance to breathe now and is forcing him to train every second. "I think Wood may be shocked by your flying skills in your match," Hermione said with a smile, and there was actually a little bit of pride in her tone. "Fortunately, the weather has been good recently. It rained a lot some time ago. I was worried that Harry would catch a cold," Cyrus said casually. He sat across from Hermione, and the two of them were now using the same table. "The Hufflepuff Seeker seems to be quite capable. I watched him play against Ravenclaw last time, and he flies better than Cho Chang. Well, Cho has a lot of potential." "Hey? When did you two get so close?" Hermione wrinkled her nose as she opened the borrowed ancient magic textbook, feeling a little unhappy. "I mean, you'd better not come into contact with others. Too much to avoid being discovered. After all, you are completely different from that annoying Malfoy. It's just that she sometimes asked me about Quidditch. Didn't I not go to the game with Hufflepuff and Slytherin? She has been training for a long time, but she still lost to Hufflepuff. She probably felt it was a pity, so she came to ask me why I didn't participate in the competition. Then she pestered me to teach her some flying skills." Hermione stopped what she was doing. "How come I don't know about this? Slytherin and Gryffindor don't always have classes together." Cyrus suddenly felt guilty. Why did he suddenly feel guilty, like he was cheating in a relationship? He didn't want to continue this topic, so he decided to change the topic. Okay, let's read the textbook. The scope of ancient magic script is very large, but at this stage, the only ones you have to learn are runes. I know that I hung on a windswept tree. 9 long nights. Wounded with a spear, dedicated to Odin. Myself to myself. On that tree of which no man knows. From where its roots run. With no bread did they refresh me nor a drink from a horn. Downwards I peered. I took up the runes, screaming I took them. Then I fell back from there. Cyrus read from the word of God. This is a legend in the Muggle world. Hermione pointed out keenly, because in the wizarding world, the so-called Odin might just be a powerful wizard. That's right. Cyrus nodded. In order to obtain the Fountain of Wisdom, Odin lost one of his right eyes in exchange for the wisdom of rune. The rune alphabet is a kind of incantation. As long as it is carved into wood, stone, metal, or even any material, you can get infinite power. This is why many very powerful alchemy tools are engraved with runes. This kind of word is similar to magic spells but different. They are not issued based on the medium of sound, but they must be recorded in order to exert their power. If you want to learn artifact alchemy, then proficiency in magic words is a must. This is a tool. The runes have a total of 24 letters, divided into groups of 8. The first 8 symbolize fertility, prosperity, love, and peace, the middle 8 symbolize obstruction and difficulty, and the last 8 are closely related to war. It is said that when learning the runes, understanding their meaning is the most difficult. Each letter, their meaning is abstract. For example, this is a letter that symbolizes wealth, prosperity, and abundance. But in different combinations, it has different meanings. They both studied. Classes like this last until Friday, and tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock will be the Quidditch match. It's time to act. Chapter 66, Hermione discovers the truth. Early the next morning, Hermione and Harry gathered in the auditorium. The weather was very good today. Wood was very happy and filled every player's plate with scrambled eggs. Come on Harry! Hermione and Ginny cheered Harry while looking at the Slytherin table with their peripheral vision, but they didn't see the conspicuous white hair. Harry was also a little depressed. He had an inexplicable affection for Riddle, maybe because Riddle's experience reminded him of himself. To be honest, staying at the Dursleys' house would be worse than being in an orphanage. Won't he come to cheer me on? I thought we were friends. He may have gotten up late, and with so many people watching, it's not convenient for him to cheer for you, Harry. Ron comforted. After a while, Cyrus walked in. He actually got up early, but he just went to the secret chamber in advance. At this point, he needed to use the basilisk's voice to give Hermione a hint so she could be left alone. After entering the dining room, Cyrus raised his chin at them with Malfoy's usual smug expression. To others, this might seem like a provocation, but Harry knew that this was actually Mr. Riddle greeting him. Malfoy is really annoying, isn't he? Although I don't know why he didn't participate in the competition, it's a good thing. Slytherin lost to Hufflepuff last time, and the championship can only be between us and Hufflepuff. The time has come. Wood frowned and patted Harry on the shoulder. Okay, Harry, hurry up and eat. I want to confirm the tactics before the game starts. After saying that, Wood left the auditorium and headed to the Quidditch field. Harry thought that maybe he could say a few words to Mr. Riddle before the game started. It would be best if he could get encouragement and recognition from the other party. Then he would be more confident, so he slowly dragged on. After a while, there were not many people in the auditorium. How are you feeling, Harry? Cyrus walked over slowly to greet them. It's not bad, but Diggory is very good, I doubt I can win. You should have confidence in yourself, Cyrus said casually. His mind was not on the Quidditch match at all. Anyway, this match would not be held in the end. The 5 people left the auditorium together. Since Harry had to go back to pack his game supplies, Cyrus separated from them first. I'm going to the stadium first. However, as soon as Cyrus reached the corner, he cast a disguise spell on himself and followed them again. Also, control the basilisk to swim in the pipe. At this time, Harry's originally slightly nervous mood was filled with a very heavy worry, because just as he stepped onto the marble stairs, he suddenly heard the voice again, I am to kill, so hungry, for so long. I smell blood. I smell blood. Ah! He shouted, and Ron and Hermione jumped away from him in horror. What's wrong with you? That voice. Harry said, turning his head and looking back. I just heard it again, did you hear it? Ron shook his head, his eyes widening. That strange sound you mentioned before. Ginny looked around, but where is it? It can't be invisible, right? Or is there a road that we can't see? Invisible road. Hermione suddenly reached out and slapped her forehead. Harry, I suddenly understood something. I'm going to the library. She hurried away and went upstairs. What did she understand? Harry asked frantically, still looking around to figure out where the sound was coming from. I don't know, Ron said, shaking his head. But why does she want to go to the library? Because that's the way Hermione is, Ron said, shrugging. When in doubt, go to the library. Harry stood there uncertainly, trying to catch the sound again. But at this time, it was too late. You'd better act quickly, Ginny said. But that voice. It's almost 11 o'clock game. The three left, but Cyrus turned to follow Hermione. He saw Hermione running towards the library in a hurry, her hair like a bunch of flowers that kept blooming and gathering. She ran to the third floor in one breath. The door of the library was locked and there was no one inside. Everyone, including Mrs. Pants, went to the Quidditch pitch. Hermione pushed the door violently but did not open it. So he simply took a half step back and took out his wand. Alohomora. The chains clattered to the ground. Petrification, an invisible path, it could be in the wall, it should be a pipe, a sound only Harry can hear. She walked through the rows of bookshelves, and the previous clues seemed to be connected to a huge web, almost weaving the real answer in her mind. Cyrus followed her leisurely, and at this time he even lifted the illusion spell. A huge basilisk swam out of the pipe, its steel-like scales rustling on the ground. This huge monster followed behind Cyrus, but soon lowered its head and swam to the other side close to the ground. Rows of bookshelves full of books became its cover. In the dark library, only the green-colored scales shone faintly. That should be a snake, that's why Harry can hear it. Because he is a Parselmouth, but what kind of snake can turn people into stone and exist for 1,000 years? Hermione pulled out several books in succession from the bookshelf. One documents the plumbing system at Hogwarts, and the other labels fantastic beasts. She looked through it with the light of the wand. The basilisk can live for 1,000 years, but the magic power of the basilisk kills people, not petrifies them. But how is no one dead? She suddenly remembered something, because none of the victims have directly seen the basilisk's eye. Colin Creevey had seen it through the camera, and Justin had seen through the headless Nico. Ginny said that Percy and Penelope were in love, and she was holding a mirror in her hand, and she should be dressing up when she saw it from the mirror. And Mrs. Norris, who was the first victim of the basilisk, must have seen it through the reflection of water on the ground. So the effect of the magic is attenuated. It's like hearing the cry of the mandrake with earmuffs. Hermione's face showed excited joy. She solved a 50-year-old mystery. Needless to say, she felt a sense of accomplishment. More importantly, the culprit was likely to be caught because of this. But soon, new doubts arose in her mind. If the thing in the Chamber of Secrets was a basilisk, then Hagrid was obviously wronged. The scene Mr. Riddle showed them last time was still fresh in her mind. Although I couldn't see clearly what the monster Hagrid raised was, at least it was not a basilisk. No basilisk was lumpy and had so much hair. Mr. Riddle must be mistaken. Hermione closed the book. She couldn't wait to tell everyone the answer, especially Mr. Riddle. She wanted Mr. Riddle to know that Hagrid had been wronged, that he had made a mistake, and that her ingenuity had unlocked the answer. Knowing the monster's true face and how it moves, it won't be so difficult for them to find each other. Okay, it's still difficult actually, the plumbing system in Hogwarts is very complicated, but at least now we have a clue. However, at this moment, Hermione heard footsteps echoing among the empty bookshelves in the library. Pa-ta-ta-shat! Who is there? Her heart missed a beat in vain, her whole body shrank in vigilance, knocking over her chair, and she raised her wand in the direction of the footsteps. But the owner of the footsteps didn't respond and just kept approaching. At this moment, Hermione's clothes under her robes were wet with fearful sweat. But not only did she not panic, she was calmer than before. Maybe it's the air I became his target. Hermione breathed heavily, her whole body was shaking, but she still made the right choice. She knew clearly that she was probably doomed, but even if she sacrificed herself, she would at least leave clues to the truth to her two stupid friends and Mr. Riddle. So, she hurriedly took down a page and wrote one word. Footsteps were approaching. Fluorescent lights illuminated the visitor. It's Malfoy. Chapter 67, The Petrified Hermione. MMR Riddle. Hermione's voice was filled with tears, and she collapsed as if she had been relaxed, as if all the bones in her body had been ripped out. You scared me to death. Sorry, Hermione. Did you find any clues? Cyrus said with a smile. His white hair looked very dazzling and he had absorbed Malfoy's life force during this period, making Malfoy's face look as pale as a layer of flour, especially standing in the darkness like now, it looked like a dead corpse. But Hermione didn't notice this. After experiencing that moment of fear, when she saw Cyrus, it was as if she saw a life-saving straw, and she kept talking, I found out, that monster is basilisk. You've wronged Hagrid. The basilisk is moving inside the pipes. We'd better get a mirror. Hermione desperately grabbed Cyrus's arms and spoke incoherently. Don't be impatient, Hermione, you can speak slowly. Cyrus patted Hermione on the back to calm her down. Hermione then explained everything she had discovered to Cyrus. You are really smart, Hermione. Cyrus praised sincerely. Apparently, his compliments were very helpful to Hermione. The little witch sniffed her nose proudly and her tail almost went up to the sky. But you're wrong about one thing. Cyrus let go of Hermione, took a half step back, and distanced himself from her. He seemed to be back in the darkness all of a sudden. Although the two of them were only a few steps apart, the light from Hermione's wand separated her from Cyrus. Mr. Riddle. I didn't wrong Hagrid, Hermione, you made a mistake. But Hagrid is really not. Of course, he is not. Cyrus interrupted Hermione, and the expression on his face began to feel strange to Hermione. I said, I didn't wrongly accuse him, to be precise, I framed him. P.S. Damn. WTF. But why? To put it simply, I am the heir of Slytherin. Cyrus smiled and explained generously, I planned all the attacks in the past 2 semesters. How is this possible? Hermione was shaken, her eyes sparkling with tears. What Hermione felt at this time was pain, deception, and betrayal. How could she believe that Mr. Riddle, who she had been with for so long, who had stolen Snape's potion ingredients together, and who tutored her, was actually the one they had been looking for? He even took a shower with myself. But why? You are also from the Muggle world. Do you think of us as mudbloods like Malfoy? Hermione asked painfully. This time she felt this more than when she was insulted by Malfoy before. The words carry her pain. No, I never thought so, but in order to be resurrected, there must be some sacrifice. This is a lesson. I think next time, you should know that you should not easily believe in a thing that can think. Cyrus was calm as he said that. Okay, it's time for you to go get some sleep, Hermione. But don't worry, I won't kill you. It was almost like he was putting a child to sleep. Hermione seemed to realize something. She heard the sound of steel scraping the ground behind her. The sound was so harsh that she wondered why she hadn't heard it just now. But now, she could only close her eyes desperately and slam into Cyrus. Cyrus did not block her way and allowed Hermione to struggle. Sometimes she opened her eyes to determine the position of herself and the basilisk, but most of the time she kept her eyes closed, avoiding the basilisk's dim sight like the sunset. The angry basilisk saw its prey moving and sped up. Its steel-like scales quickly streaked across the ground, bursting into bright sparks. The twisting body knocked down rows of bookshelves, chasing Hermione's escape direction. Filled with fear, Hermione kept throwing spells behind her like crazy. She knew a lot of spells, some of which were taught to her by Cyrus. Thinking of this, Hermione's heart was filled with sadness and irony. But now, she still has to protect herself first. She clutched the note tightly in one hand and threw the spell behind her as she ran. Avis. Vipera Evanesca. Bewitched Sleep. Glacis. The spells that flew from Hermione's wand shimmered like bright fireworks on a summer night. However, these spells had almost no effect on the basilisk. The colorful green scales blocked these spells like iron armor, and even failed to slow down the progress of the basilisk. Even the freezing spell, which was enough to cool down the salamander, failed to hinder the basilisk. The basilisk is much faster than Hermione, but Hermione is like a nimble little mouse scurrying between the dense bookshelves. In the small space, the huge size of the basilisk becomes a kind of inconvenient. But Cyrus was patient. He watched the basilisk push Hermione to a dead-end step by step, saw Hermione crawling into the gap of the collapsed bookshelf in fear, and watched the basilisk violently use its tail to smash the obstacles in front of him. Now, Hermione finally rushed to the library door. As long as she pushed the door open, she could escape from here. Maybe there are still people in the corridor, and maybe those people can help her, if not, at least they can expose Malfoy, no, expose Riddle's ambition. However, when she tried hard to push the door open with both hands, she found that the library door was motionless as if it had been welded shut. Alohomora! Alohomora! She jumped so anxiously that her voice was distorted, and she poked the door lock with her wand desperately, but the door remained motionless. It's useless. I cast the counter curse long ago. Cyrus slowly approached her. At this time, Hermione could already feel the huge monster approaching behind her. It slowed down and its body was thicker than her waist, blocking the last escape route. Hermione could only turn her head, her back pressed against the wall, and her upper and lower eyelids seemed to be glued together. She even forgot how to breathe in that moment. The stinking and cold breath of the basilisk slapped her cheek. Is there nothing you can do? Cyrus said jokingly. He picked up the wand and gently touched it with 2 fingers. Hermione felt like her body was out of control, as if many arms had grabbed her, violently breaking her joints, and opening her eyelids. In his sight, the shadow of the basilisk was like an undulating mountain peak. You're a bit disappointing to me, Hermione. Cyrus couldn't help but remind him, remember what I taught you to block the basilisk's sight. Hermione tried her best to cast a head-soaking charm on herself at the last moment. Then her eyelids were completely opened by Cyrus with magic, and the eyes of the big snake in the darkness struck straight into Hermione's soul. The blisters burst. The stiff Hermione fell down like a piece of iron. The basilisk wanted to continue attacking. It wanted to tear the person in front of it into pieces, but Cyrus stopped it. This huge monster could only obey under the magic of the snake language. The evil expression on Cyrus's face disappeared. He now looked stiff. He walked to Hermione's side without saying a word and changed her into a position that looked more comfortable. Of course, she actually couldn't feel it. Then, he raised his wand and fired a spark in the direction of the forbidden book area. The library alarm was triggered. Chapter 68, Quidditch match stopped. Time goes back by dozens of minutes. Harry walked quickly to Gryffindor Tower, picked up his Nimbus 2000, and joined the bustling flow of people passing through the grounds, but his mind was still in the castle, chasing the voice. As he changed into his bright red robe in the locker room, his only solace was that everyone was outside watching the game. The players walked onto the field amid earth-shattering cheers. Oliver Wood took to the air and performed a warm-up flight around the goalpost. Ms. Hooch released the ball. The members of the Hufflepuff team, wearing light yellow clothes, were gathering together at the moment, seizing the last minute to discuss tactics. Harry looked towards the audience. Malfoy with white hair was very conspicuous. He was squeezing through the crowded crowd towards Ginny and Ron. Harry didn't see Hermione though. Cyrus panted, sat next to Ginny, and asked knowingly, "Finally found you, where is Hermione?" "Went to the library," Ginny said immediately, recounting everything that had happened since she and Cyrus separated. "She's alone? You shouldn't have let her go by herself. What if there's danger?" "There is no way, right? How will the heir happens to know Hermione's location?" Ron didn't believe such a coincidence could happen. But when Harry was about to ride on his broomstick, Professor McGonagall suddenly walked across the field, holding a huge purple microphone in her hand. Harry's heart sank like a stone. The attack may have happened again. Sure enough, looking at Professor McGonagall just now was a clear sign that the monster had started to act. Ron's face suddenly turned pale. He stood up in a panic and started to squeeze towards the playground. "It can't really be." Cyrus and Ginny quickly followed. "The match is cancelled," Professor McGonagall said through the microphone to the packed bleachers. There were boos and shouts of disapproval from the crowd. Oliver Wood looked crestfallen. He landed on the ground and ran towards Professor McGonagall without getting off his broomstick. "But Professor!" he shouted, "we must compete, the Quidditch Cup, Gryffindor." Professor McGonagall ignored him and continued to shout with the microphone, "All students must return to the common room of their respective houses, where the person in charge of the house will tell you more about the situation. Please leave as soon as possible." Then she lowered the microphone and motioned for Harry to come over. "Potter, I think you'd better come with me." Harry was confused. Why did he always find himself tangled when something went wrong? He couldn't understand why this attack had anything to do with him now that he was on the Quidditch field. On the other side, nearly 1,000 students made disheartened noises. In the bustling crowd, Cyrus, Ron, and Ginny struggled to separate from the flow and ran towards this side. "Well, maybe you'd better come too, Ron Weasley." McGonagall looked at Ron and rarely let go, but Cyrus and Ginny were not so lucky. "As for you two, hurry up and go back to the common room of your own houses. Especially you, Malfoy." After saying that, she left with Harry and Ron, who didn't know what to do. Harry glanced back and saw Cyrus and Ginny standing alone on the green grassy playground, with the crowd behind them. He felt as if the world was divided into 3 parts, and the noisy noises were suddenly far away from him. The angry wood was like a silhouette in a mime. "What must have happened?" Ginny said very worriedly. "I'm afraid there's an accident." Cyrus pondered for a moment and said, "Let's go back first. I believe Harry and Ron will tell us what happened when they come back." "Well," Ginny could only nod, "I hope Hermione is okay." "Hermione!" Ron exclaimed. Their bad premonitions came true. This time, Professor McGonagall did not take Harry and Ron to anyone's office, but directly to the school hospital wing. Hermione lay there motionless, her glazed eyes open unnaturally. "She was found near the library," said Professor McGonagall. "I don't think either of you can explain it. Someone forced her to open her eyes." Madame Pomfrey could see the weird look on Hermione's expression at a glance. She obviously wanted to close her eyes tightly, but her eyelids were roughly opened. This means that the attacker most likely cast the spell to open her eyes. This clue made McGonagall easily think of the basilisk. However, other victims could still explain it, but there seemed to be nothing on Hermione that could prevent her from seeing the basilisk. But she was still petrified, not killed. "I will escort you back to Gryffindor Tower," Professor McGonagall said with a heavy heart. "Anyway, I have to go speak to the students. All students must return to the common room of their houses by 6 o'clock in the evening. No student is allowed to leave the dormitory after this time. A teacher will escort students to each class. No student is allowed to come to the class without the company of a teacher. All Quidditch practices and matches have been postponed. No activities will be conducted in the evenings." Gryffindor students crowded into the common room, listening to Professor McGonagall in silence. She rolled up the parchment she had just read and then said in a somewhat strangled voice, "In fact, needless to say, I have rarely been in such pain before. The school will probably be closed, unless the culprit who planned these attacks is caught. I urge everyone who thinks they know something to come forward." She climbed awkwardly through the portrait hole, and the Gryffindor students immediately started chattering. 2 Gryffindors have fallen, not counting a Gryffindor ghost, a Ravenclaw, and a Hufflepuff. Lee Jordan, a friend of the Weasley twins, said. Counting on his fingers, "Has any teacher noticed that all the Slytherins are safe and sound? Isn't it obvious that these things come from Slytherin? The heirs of Slytherin, the monsters of Slytherin, then why not just kick out all the Slytherins?" He shouted, to a chorus of nods and sparse applause. But Harry wasn't listening. He couldn't seem to shake the sight of Hermione lying in the hospital bed, as stiff as stone. If the culprit is not caught soon, he will return to the Dursleys for the rest of his life. Tom Riddle wanted to report Hagrid because he faced the prospect of returning to a Muggle orphanage once the school closed. Harry now understood exactly how he felt. "What should we do?" Ron asked quietly in Harry's ear. He and Ginny huddled in the corner. "Do you think they suspect Hagrid?" "We have to go talk to him," Harry said, having made up his mind. "I can't believe it's him this time. But since he released the monster last time, he must know how to enter the Chamber of Secrets. This is the only breakthrough point we have right now." "But Professor McGonagall said we must stay in the tower unless we are in the classroom." "I think," said Harry, his voice softer, "that it's time to take out my old cloak again. Then let's go find Mr. Riddle first and then go together." Chapter 69, Cornelius Fudge. At night, Harry and Ron went to bed as usual. They waited until Neville, Dean, and Seamus stopped discussing the Chamber of Secrets and finally fell asleep. Then they got up from the bed, got dressed again, and put the invisibility cloak on themselves. When they reached the common room, they found Ginny already sitting on the sofa waiting for them. "Let's go to the Slytherin lounge first. I've managed to contact Mr. Riddle. He will be waiting for us at the door," Ginny said immediately. The walk through the gloomy corridors was not a pleasant one. Harry had wandered around the castle in the middle of the night many times before, but he had never seen so many people there after the sun went down. Teachers, prefects, and ghosts patrolled the corridors in pairs, looking for anything out of the ordinary. Although the invisibility cloak is easy to use, it does not work every time. Once, he and Ron were almost discovered by Snape. He always felt that Snape seemed to be very sensitive to the invisibility cloak. Finally, they reached the Slytherin lounge, but there was no one outside the door. "Where's Riddle? He won't be caught, right?" Ron lowered his voice and said with a little worry that there were too many teachers patrolling tonight. "Here it is." Cyrus heard their conversation and suddenly revealed his true identity in the air. "I used a disillusionment charm, otherwise I wouldn't be able to hide from the professor's observation." Cyrus followed the voice and stretched out his hand to lift Harry's invisibility cloak, then frowned. "Isn't it a bit awkward to put it on the four of us? Isn't it small? Don't you know the disguise charm?" Ron asked strangely. "But I can only guarantee that I will not be discovered when I am standing still. If I move, the professors will notice something is wrong," Cyrus said deliberately. "Now, Malfoy's body is no longer useful. What he wants is, Ginny. Ginny, let me possess you. If one of us is less, the risk of exposure will be reduced," he said, "and in this situation, if I keep possessing Malfoy, I'm afraid by the end of the term there is no way to meet you normally." Ginny didn't seem to resist at all, but showed a shy expression. But Harry had some doubts. "What about Malfoy? I'll let him have a good sleep. When he wakes up, he won't know of anything." Ron didn't seem very willing to have someone possess his sister, but Ginny answered first, "That's it. Mr. Riddle is also more powerful. He can protect me." Cyrus quickly transferred from Malfoy's body to Ginny's body, then stuffed the unconscious Malfoy back into the common room and left him alone. Then, the three of them left the castle wearing the invisibility cloak. Harry and Ron both had an awkward feeling. They had finally adapted to Cyrus being Malfoy, and now he was Ginny. This feeling was so strange. But there was no time to dwell on this at this point. It was a starry night, and they hurried towards the lighted window of Hagrid's residence. They didn't take off the invisibility cloak until they reached his door. Seconds after they knocked on the door, Hagrid flung it open. They saw Hagrid pointing a crossbow at them, and Fang, the boarhound, barking loudly behind him. This startled them all. This was the first time Harry had seen Hagrid with this attitude. "Oh, it's you," Hagrid was obviously relieved, put down the weapon in his hand, and glared at them. "What are you three doing here? What's that for?" Harry said, pointing to the crossbow as they walked into the room. And Cyrus tried to make his presence as low as possible. Nothing," Hagrid said vaguely. "I thought that well, it doesn't matter, sit down. I'll make tea." He seemed a little uneasy, and the water in the kettle spilled out, almost extinguishing the fire. Then his thick hand shook violently, knocking the teapot over. "Are you okay, Hagrid? Have you heard about Hermione?" "Oh, yes, I heard that," Hagrid said, his voice choked up. It could be seen that he did feel sorry for Hermione, but he kept looking nervously towards the window, as if something more terrifying was waiting for him. "I think you don't have to worry too much, she will be fine, she will." He poured several cups of tea for Harry and others, but forgot to put the tea leaves. He was about to put a thick piece of fruitcake on a plate when there was a loud knock on the door. Hagrid was so frightened that he immediately dropped the fruitcake in his hand, and he looked flustered. Harry and Ron were equally flustered as him, and even Cyrus was a little shaken. Because he knew who was knocking on the door. "Hide quickly, it will be bad if we are discovered sneaking out." Cyrus hurriedly took Harry's invisibility cloak and put it on them all. The three of them huddled tightly behind the sofa, and Cyrus was breathing harder than before. "Dumbledore is coming in." When Hagrid saw they were all hidden, he grabbed his crossbow and yanked the door open again. "Good evening, Hagrid." Dumbledore walked in first, with a very serious expression, followed by a very strange-looking man. The stranger was short, stocky, with messy grey hair and an anxious look on his face. His clothes were a strange hodgepodge: pinstriped suit, bright red tie, long black cape, purple pointed boots. He held a dark green top hat under his arm. "That's my dad's boss." Ron gasped. "Cornely Fudge, Minister for Magic." "Stop talking." Harry nudged Ron hard with his elbow to shut him up. This move obviously attracted Dumbledore's attention. His blue eyes looked at where they were hiding, and the expression on his face became playful. But soon, he looked away as if he didn't notice them. This made Cyrus wonder if Dumbledore had seen him through the invisibility cloak. But he soon decided otherwise. This was not an ordinary invisibility cloak. He believed that Dumbledore might have just noticed the existence of the invisibility cloak. After all, he had studied this piece of clothing for a long time. But he probably didn't know exactly how many people were under the clothes. Hagrid suddenly turned pale and began to sweat on his forehead. He slumped into a chair and looked from Dumbledore to Cornelius Fudge. "It's too bad, Hagrid," Fudge said in a crisp, rapid tone. "It's too bad that it had to come. 4 attacks on Muggles. This has gone too far, and the Ministry of Magic must take action." "I didn't, you know I didn't, Dumbledore, sir. I hope you understand, Cornelius, I completely trust Hagrid." Dumbledore frowned. "But you see, Albus," Fudge said uncomfortably, "Hagrid's criminal record is not good for him. The Ministry of Magic has to take some measures, the school board has been contacted. But Cornelius, I have to tell you that taking Hagrid away won't help at all." "Look at it from my point of view," said Fudge, playing with his top hat. "I'm under a lot of pressure. Something has to be done. If it turns out it's not Hagrid, he'll come back. Others have nothing to say. But I have to take him away. Shouldn't I fulfill my duty?" "Take me away," Hagrid said, trembling all over. "Take me where? The time is very short, it is not a punishment, it is just a preventive measure. If another person is caught, you will be released and receive a full apology." Fudge said to himself, although he and Dumbledore both came here to look for Hagrid, but he never looked at Hagrid from the beginning to the end. Of course, he may also feel a little ashamed. After all, his current behavior is tantamount to asking Hagrid to take the blame. But this is very unreasonable. Even a person with a criminal record should not be directly convicted without evidence. This is unreasonable and illegal. You know, even after Voldemort was resurrected, none of the Death Eaters who had been exonerated were punished without evidence. As the chief wizard of the Wizengamot, couldn't Dumbledore stop Fudge from such ridiculous behavior? But although Dumbledore protested, he did not substantially stop Fudge. Cyrus could understand Dumbledore's horror even more. Chapter 70, Dumbledore was driven away. A/N, suppose the MC was 17 to 18 years old before transmigration, who should be the love interest after he is free? You can choose between students and teachers as well as the Death Eaters. No gay. If he resurrected from the Philosopher's Stone, it's best to say that he will have a non-aging body, as his new body will be made from alchemy like the homunculus in Full Metal Alchemist. So Hermione and Ginny are also on the table, as I can make him single without aging till the FMLS becomes adults, like how we don't feel grossed out reading a 115Y/O vampire with a 21Y/O girl. Do tell. At this time, someone knocked on the door again. Dumbledore went over and opened the door. When he saw the sullen figure walking in, Harry let out a breath that forced Cyrus to give him an elbow poke. Outside the door was Lucius Malfoy. Lucius Malfoy strode into Hagrid's hut, wrapped tightly in a long black travelling cloak and with a cold, content smile on his face. Fang started barking. Seeing Malfoy's appearance, Cyrus was finally relieved. No matter what, things finally developed to where they are now. Malfoy has cooperated with him in using some means to drive Dumbledore out of school. Hogwarts without Dumbledore is no longer a threat to Cyrus. His mood suddenly became clear, and he couldn't help but curl up his lips. Another person who was not surprised at all by Malfoy's appearance was Dumbledore, who had already guessed that such a day would come. It was impossible for Tom Riddle to allow him to stay in the school, which was not conducive to the final step of his plan. That would be too unsafe. Just like last year, it's best to find ways to distract yourself. Dumbledore was originally wondering when the other party planned to take action. It looks like it's now. You're here, Fudge, Malfoy said with satisfaction. Very good, very good. It is also his master's plan to let Hagrid take the blame again. This matter is indispensable for him to put pressure on Fudge, he just needs to buy some public opinion. Now seeing that Fudge has arrived at Hogwarts, Lucius Malfoy is naturally very satisfied. But Hagrid doesn't like this uninvited guest. What good intentions can the Malfoy family have? What are you doing here? Get out of my house. Dear friend, please believe me, I am not happy to enter this room of yours. Oh, you call this a house? Lucius Malfoy looked around this small shabby room and sneered, I just came to the school to have a look and someone told me the headmaster was here. Malfoy's behavior is indeed annoying. If Cyrus hadn't known that the other party was one of his own, even he would have wanted to punch Malfoy a few times. What do you want from me, Lucius? Dumbledore asked. He spoke politely. Things are terrible, Dumbledore. Lucius lazily rolled out a long piece of parchment. He looked relaxed and seemed to have a chance to win, even in the face of Dumbledore, or rather, because he knew he was facing Dumbledore, so he didn't panic at all. The board feels it's time to let you go. This is a temporary suspension order, all 12 directors have signed it. We feel you may not be using your talents to protect the students. How many attacks have there been so far? At this rate, there will be no Muggle students left at Hogwarts, and we all know that will be a terrible loss for the school. He said it as if he was very heartbroken and sorry that students from the Muggle world were attacked. What are you talking about, Lucius? Fudge said, looking panicked. Dumbledore has been temporarily suspended. No, no. We absolutely do not want that to H. The appointment or temporary suspension of the headmaster is a matter for the board of directors, Fudge. The Ministry of Magic has no right to interfere. Lucius' face was calm. He had never taken Fudge, the incompetent minister, to heart. Since Dumbledore failed to prevent these attacks. But look, Lucius, if Dumbledore can't stop, Fudge said, his upper lip beginning to sweat, he thought the governors were crazy to suspend Dumbledore at this juncture. I mean, who could stop that? We'll just wait and see, Malfoy said, a sly smile on his face. Prevent? He didn't even think about stopping it. How many people did you threaten and blackmail before you forced them to agree, Malfoy? Hagrid was furious, looking at him as if he wanted to teach Lucius a lesson directly with his fists, preferably with a fist. Smash his head into the pumpkin patch. Malfoy was naturally not afraid of Hagrid. He said sarcastically, I want to give you a piece of advice. Don't yell like this at the guards of Azkaban. They won't like it. Hagrid wasn't even afraid of Azkaban anymore when he thought about Dumbledore being suspended. You can't take Dumbledore away. If you take him away, the Muggles will have no chance of survival. There will be attacks soon. Calm down, Hagrid, Dumbledore said sternly. He looked at Lucius Malfoy. If the board wants me to leave, Lucius, of course, I will give up my seat. But Fudge stammered. No. Hagrid growled. Dumbledore's piercing blue eyes remained fixed on Lucius's cold grey eyes. However, Dumbledore said very slowly and clearly, so that everyone present could hear every word he said, I will only truly leave this place when everyone here betrays me. This isn't just a school. You will also find that at Hogwarts, those who ask for help always receive it. Cyrus was quite certain that Dumbledore had given them a look that was both a reminder and a warning. Not only did he discover Harry and Ron, he even discovered himself. The emotion is commendable, Malfoy said, bowing. We will all miss your very personal way of handling things, Albus. I only hope that your successor can completely prevent the ongoing incident. Malfoy strode to the door of the cabin, opened it, bowed and sent Dumbledore out. Fudge played with his top hat, waiting for Hagrid to walk in front of him, but Hagrid stood still, took a deep breath, and said cautiously. If someone is looking for something, they can just follow the spider and they'll find themselves in the right direction. That's all I'm saying. Fudge stared at him in confusion. Okay, here I come, said Hagrid, putting on his moleskin coat. However, just when he was about to follow Fudge out, he stopped again and said loudly, while I'm away, someone needs to feed Fang. The door slammed shut and Ron ripped off the invisibility cloak. This is going to be troublesome, he said gruffly, Dumbledore is gone. They're probably going to do something to Hagrid. There will be attacks every day after Dumbledore's gone. Fang barked again and scratched the closed door with his claws. The next day, news of Dumbledore's departure soon spread fear like never before. Cyrus was in a very happy mood. The weather had been bright recently, the clear sky and the lake were glowing, and the trees in the Forbidden Forest were lush and green, looking very vital. Cyrus used Ginny's body to greedily enjoy all this. Vibrant. For the other students at Hogwarts, fear hangs over them like a cold fog, but for Cyrus, getting back to his new life is getting closer. Chapter 71, Talking. The weather is gradually starting to get hotter. Looking up, the sky seems to have become higher. This was originally a good weather for playing Quidditch, but the Quidditch game has been cancelled, and even wanting to go for a walk is a luxury. There was no one in the corridor between classes, and the professors who were walking around on guard did not allow anyone to stay. Even to go to class, the little wizards had to line up one by one and be personally escorted by the professors. The entire school was in an extremely depressed state. Even in the Gryffindor common room, no one was willing to make trouble. Everyone was in a panic and wanted to get through this semester as soon as possible. Professor McGonagall really wanted to have everything sorted out, and it would be best to find the heir, but there was no clue at all right now. She wasn't as able to see the whole situation as Dumbledore was, but fortunately, it wasn't the worst yet. The students who were attacked can still be saved. They just need to wait for the mandrake to mature and wake them up. Perhaps by then, the real culprit will be found. For this reason, she was also worried that the attacker might silence the petrified students, and the hospital wing became a heavily guarded place. Harry and Ron wanted to see Hermione again but were stopped. Now, I am afraid that only the students of Slytherin House are not worried at all. The people who were attacked were mostly mudbloods, which proved that their house was not the successor's target from the beginning. Rather, the successor is likely to be one of them. This greatly encouraged them, and every time they looked at people from other houses during class, they couldn't help but feel proud. Especially Malfoy. When Cyrus returned the body to him, he modified a little bit of his memory. Now he doesn't notice anything wrong at all, but if he carefully recalls his experiences in the past few months, he will find that there are no relevant memories in his brain at all, and there is only a fog. He didn't notice anything was wrong at all and walked around the school as if he had just been appointed head boy. Moreover, he mingled with two old friends, Goyle Crabbe, and he was very happy that Dumbledore was kicked out of school. But in fact, it wasn't that he hated Dumbledore or doubted Dumbledore's ability. It was just that the person who facilitated this incident was his father, so he was very proud. When Cyrus came out of class today, Cyrus saw Ron walking into the common room very angry, with Harry and their roommate Andy comforting him. "Okay, Ron, don't be so impulsive. You are familiar with what kind of a person he is." Dean patted Ron on the back. He himself was a half-blood wizard and naturally hated Malfoy very much. But he's not as impulsive as Ron. If you two hadn't stopped me, I would have given him a few punches. I would have killed him with my bare hands without a wand. Ron still felt regretful thinking about it now. Seeing how angry he was, Cyrus immediately walked over and asked, "What's the matter?" "It's Malfoy," Harry said helplessly. "You know how much of a bastard he is. I miss you a little bit." Halfway through his sentence, Dean thought Harry was referring to Ginny at the duel club. Something about beating up Slytherin. He said that the next mudblood to be attacked will definitely die, and he also said that it's a pity that it's not Hermione. Ron said angrily, "If I were the heir, I would kill this little bastard first. He's still acting weird with Snape." Seamus heard their conversation and came over, imitated Malfoy, holding his throat, and repeated his words in a pretentious manner. "I already knew that my father would drive Dumbledore away. Professor Snape, why don't you apply for the position of headmaster?" Cyrus looked at his performance with a sense of nausea. But Seamus didn't stop. He turned around and imitated Snape, shaking his non-existent hair. "Why, Mr. Malfoy, Professor Dumbledore has only been temporarily suspended by the board. I bet he will be back among us soon." He switched back and forth between the two characters. "Yeah, that's right, Professor. If you apply for this position, I guess my father will vote for you. I will tell my father that you are the best teacher here, Professor." Seamus looked even more disgusting than Cyrus, and shook his head with disgust. "Don't you know how proud Snape is? I dare say you have never seen him so happy in your life." Snape was indeed looking a little proud because he was not without complaints against Dumbledore. But it's hard to say that he was happy. What good would it do him to have Dumbledore driven away? On the contrary, the successor is still roaming in the school. What if it is Voldemort? Snape just wanted Voldemort to die. Even if it wasn't Voldemort, if the other party continued to attack, the school would have to be closed. At that time, where could he go? What happiness could he have there? In that place that gave him a gloomy past. At least one thing about him was similar to the boy named Harry Potter, and that was that they both considered Hogwarts their true home. Then they scolded Malfoy together. There was another Hufflepuff student who also upset Ron, but that was nothing compared to Lockhart. "Do you know what that guy said?" He insisted that Hagrid was the culprit. Ron said, "I think Harry almost wanted to kill him with a book, and I was almost the same. We all misunderstood Hagrid." Cyrus could only say regretfully. Dean and Seamus left after a while. Even on such a day, the school did not announce that it would cancel the exam. They planned to review first to avoid the results being too ugly. Hermione would be heartbroken if she knew about this. I'm afraid she wouldn't want to miss any exams. Cyrus made a little joke to lighten the atmosphere. I'm just the opposite. Ron said, focusing on Cyrus, can I ask you something, Mr. Riddle? Cyrus nodded, and Ron suddenly looked happy. Then I have an idea. How about I let you possess me and then you help me take the exam? Don't even think about it. Cyrus rolled his eyes. Ron really didn't disappoint in terms of opportunism. The exam is to test how much knowledge you have mastered. You shouldn't avoid it. You sound like Hermione, Ron said disappointedly, but soon, they mentioned to Cyrus what they had discovered in the herbology class today. Mr. Riddle, Harry lowered his voice, do you remember what Hagrid said earlier? If someone wants to find something, they can just follow the spider and they will find it in the right direction. He saw the spider going to the Forbidden Forest. Of course, I think it might not be the Forbidden Forest, maybe it's not that far. Ron said almost as if praying. Spiders alone are enough for him, let alone going to the Forbidden Forest. But thinking of the heir of Slytherin and the petrified Hermione, he didn't want to back down. At least he knew Harry would never give up. Then let's take action tonight. Cyrus couldn't wait. Chapter 72, Marauder's Map, Contract Magic. Waiting for the dead of night is not that easy. Fred and George seemed to be the only ones in Gryffindor who still had energy, and they pestered Harry and Ron to play Thundercrackers almost into the night. To be honest, if Cyrus had known they were coming, he would have slept. Otherwise, he wouldn't be so bored. Fred thought he was Ginny and comforted him. Don't worry too much, Ginny, we can only do our best, Fred said as he played his cards. Yes, and if the thing is lost, it is lost. We have told Dumbledore, and I believe he will find a way. George said. The twins' words were like a bucket of cold water poured on the face of the sleepy Cyrus, making him suddenly feel awake. From what they said, it seemed like they knew about their diary and told Dumbledore. Didn't Ginny say that only Harry and the others knew? Cyrus' heart seemed to be tied to a heavy rock and sank suddenly. Although things have reached this point, whether Dumbledore knows that the diary is his identity no longer has much impact. The other party has been kicked out of Hogwarts. If the plan goes well, only Fawkes will help Harry deal with the basilisk. But Cyrus was unwilling to expose his weaknesses to Dumbledore. That's Dumbledore. Dumbledore even planned his own death carefully. Voldemort in the original book was clearly arranged by him. When he first learned that Voldemort planned to make 6 horcruxes, he had already guessed what the horcruxes were. Following Voldemort's heart, he found 2 places where the horcruxes were hidden. Even when he went to the cave, it wasn't a coincidence that he took Harry with him. He knew that Voldemort would seek the Elder Wand, knew that Voldemort would ask Snape to kill him, knew that Voldemort would kill Snape, and also knew that when Voldemort learned that all other horcruxes had been destroyed. Dumbledore had calculated everything. If he hadn't made several mistakes, Cyrus would have thought that Dumbledore had the same script as him. Didn't Ginny find the thing she lost? Ron played a card and sighed, but Dumbledore has already left Hogwarts. He just forgot that the thing Ginny threw was related to Riddle, but he couldn't remember what it was. Recovered. Fred and George looked at each other in surprise and were so happy that they threw away the cards in their hands. Hey, what are you doing? I almost won. Ron looked at the cheating twins in disbelief and yelled out in anger. But Fred and George ignored him and grabbed Cyrus's shoulders excitedly. Now the heir is at his wits' end. Without the map, it will be difficult for him to seize the opportunity. Fred said. Map? After talking for a long time, it turned out that Fred and George were referring to the Marauder's map. Cyrus breathed a sigh of relief. Whether or not Dumbledore knew about the Marauder's map had little impact on him. The map, a magic tool, can only be used in its original form if held in hand. Moreover, its production process is very unusual. Cyrus himself has also studied it for a period of time. He believes that the map's effectiveness relies on the existence of Hogwarts itself, a huge magical castle. Sirius's grandfather, Phineas Nigellus Black, was once the headmaster of Hogwarts, so perhaps the Marauders referred to some information when making the props. Everyone who enters Hogwarts is forced to sign a magical contract. In the magical world, magical contracts are difficult to break. Just like the Imperious Curse, as long as the spell is still in effect, even the pure-blooded wizards would not know what they are doing. Now, about this Hogwarts contract. Dumbledore owns the Elder Wand, so he may be able to break this contract, but he must at least get the map first, otherwise he will have nowhere to use his powerful magic. Lend me the map for a few more days, Cyrus said to Fred and George. What kind of map is it? Why are you all talking like it's something mysterious? Ron asked curiously, not wanting to think about the Thunderbolt explosion card anymore. Nothing. Don't worry about our affairs. Fred and George said immediately. They didn't want Ron to know about this. They knew the character of their younger brother better than anyone else. If he knew the purpose of the Marauders map, he with his friends would definitely pester him. Ginny, you can't tell him either. After Fred and George finished speaking, they left immediately. Seeing this, Ron immediately turned his attention to Cyrus, his face full of curiosity. I can't say anything because I promised them. Naturally, Cyrus didn't want others to know the map. But they asked Ginny to keep it a secret, not you. Ron discovered this loophole. Mr. Riddle and Ginny were not the same person. But Cyrus still shook his head, it makes no difference, I promised them. And keeping secrets is very important, Ron. If one day you also reveal my secrets, then I'm afraid I will soon be ruined by others. All right. Harry put away the cards, looked at the time again, and then said, how about we set off as soon as the bell rings? I think everyone will be fast asleep by then. So be it. I'm going to get the invisibility cloak. Harry walked quickly up the stairs. After a while, Harry came down holding something in his hand. 3 people, it might be a bit crowded, but I think it's dark outside, no one will notice our feet exposed. Forget it, I'd better use the disillusionment charm, it's safer. Cyrus didn't want to be crowded with them this time. The journey through the castle was also difficult, and they had to do everything possible to avoid the teacher. The professors in the castle are always patrolling these days. After Dumbledore left, all the professors were very nervous. Even Snape was filled with worry. At last, they reached the hall, slipped behind the locks of the 2 oak doors, squeezed through the cracks without making a creaking sound, and emerged into the moonlit grounds. Of course, said Ron suddenly as they strode across the dark grass, we might not encounter any spiders in the woods, we saw the spider in the memory a long time ago. As it may not have followed in this direction, but... He didn't say anything further, leaving Harry with a bit of hope. They came to Hagrid's hut and looked at the dark windows sadly, feeling bad for him. Harry pushed the door open, and when Fang saw them, he was ecstatic and jumped up and down excitedly. Cyrus was afraid that its jumping and deep barking would wake up the people in the castle, so he cast a spell on it without hesitation to silence it. Harry placed the invisibility cloak on Hagrid's desk. You also lift the spell. We won't need to be invisible when we get to the Forbidden Forest. Harry said, come on Fang, let's go for a walk. 3 men left with a dog. Cyrus walked at the back, looking at the invisibility cloak that Harry placed on the table, the legendary Deathly Hallows. Finally, he slowly closed the door. Chapter 73, Forbidden Forest. It seemed darker near the Forbidden Forest than inside the castle. The entire sky seemed like it was covered by a huge black cloth. No stars or moon could be seen, and there was no light at all. Cyrus took out his wand and murmured, Lumos. And a thin beam of light emitted from the tip of the wand. He could have turned it brighter, even illuminating the entire forest, it would not have been a problem, but in this case, it would have been too eye-catching. This was just enough time for them to observe whether there were any spiders on the road. Harry followed suit. Taking his wand and lighting it up. Wow, now we'll be able to see in this darkness, Ron said enviously, I also want my wand to shine, but you know, it will explode if you don't do it right. Don't worry, I think Mr. and Mrs. Weasley will buy you a new one during your summer vacation. Just tell your parents that this wand was broken while looking for a successor. Cyrus comforted. What a great idea, Mr. Riddle. Ron's eyes lit up. He had not told his family about the broken wand yet. Then Harry tapped them on the shoulder and pointed to the grass. 2 lonely spiders were scurrying away from the wand's light and into the shadows of the trees. Oh, Merlin! Do we seriously need to go? Sure enough, all the spiders have entered the Forbidden Forest. Think about Hermione. Okay, Ron sighed, seemingly resigned to the worst, I'm ready. Let's go. So they entered the Forbidden Forest, and Fang scampered around them, sniffing roots and leaves. By the light of Cyrus and Harry's wands, they followed the spiders that continued to crawl along the path. They walked for about 20 minutes, and no one said anything. They only listened carefully for any other sounds besides the snapping of branches and the rustling of leaves. Then, the trees grew thicker and denser, and the stars above were no longer visible. The wands of the two men shone weakly in the endless darkness, like two weak fireflies. "They're off the road," Cyrus said softly, stretching out his arms to shine a cold light on the ground. Harry stopped, trying to see clearly the direction in which the spider was moving, but beyond the range illuminated by that glimmer of light, there was darkness beyond reach. He had never been this far into the Forbidden Forest before. The Forbidden Forest is already very dangerous, but at least Hagrid often walks here making a path, and there are also traces of centaurs. But once you deviate from the path in the forest, it is unknown what you will encounter. Cyrus reminded. His words made Ron even more terrified. Harry also clearly recalled Hagrid warning him not to stray from the forest path the last time he entered the woods. But Hagrid was miles away at the moment, probably sitting in his cell in Azkaban, and he had said something about following the spider. "Let's go, I believe Hagrid," Harry said firmly. In fact, there was no other way but to believe Hagrid now. Hagrid is trustworthy, but... Cyrus pursed his lips and walked forward first. "What do you think?" Harry asked Ron. He could make out Ron's eyes. The pupils reflected the faint light of the wand. Ron looked hesitant to speak. "I just want to say that maybe Mr. Riddle is right. It's not that I don't believe Hagrid, but Hagrid may think that the Forbidden Forest is not that dangerous." Ron said timidly, "Well, it's a walk in the park for him, but it's different for us. He thinks that the fire dragon you were playing with wasn't dangerous when it bit him. But do you know how long my hand was swollen after being bitten by Norbert? But Mr. Riddle is with us," Harry said helplessly. "Think of Hermione, we have to save her." "Okay." Ron took a breath, "for Hermione." So they followed Cyrus's shadow into the trees. The path in the Forbidden Forest is not easy to walk. It is inaccessible and full of tree roots and stumps, blocking the road. To make matters worse, the visibility at night is so poor that Harry and Ron can barely see the obstacles on the road. After a while, they noticed that the ground seemed to be sloping downwards, although the trees were still as thick as before. "We walked for at least half an hour." His and Harry's clothes were occasionally caught on low branches and thorns, and they looked a little embarrassed. Only Cyrus walked along as if he were walking on the Quidditch pitch. But at least they didn't encounter any other dangers along the way. "These spiders are quite smart, at least they can avoid danger," Ron said while swallowing. "Or, nothing else dares to come near this place." Cyrus's eyes flashed. "There is no doubt that this small area is already the territory of a Acromantula, and there is no magical animal that would think of coming here to become those guys' dinner." "MMR Riddle. Don't scare me," Ron said tremblingly. At this time, Fang suddenly became restless and curled up its tail in fear. It could not make a sound by barking due to Cyrus' spell and could only whine, but it still made a lot of noise, scaring both Harry and Ron out of their bodies. "What?" Ron asked loudly, grabbing Harry's elbow as he peered into the darkness. "There's something moving there," Harry gasped. "It sounds like something big." They listened carefully. Some distance to their right, the big thing was cutting its way through the trees, snapping countless branches. They stood there, waiting in terror, the darkness seeming to oppress their eyes. Cyrus was not afraid at all because he knew what was there. "Okay, there's nothing there, it's not a monster, it's the car you drove when you missed the train to school." As soon as Cyrus finished speaking, a dazzling light suddenly lit up on their right, which was dazzling in the darkness. Harry and Ron both raised their hands to shield their eyes. Fang jumped frantically and tried to escape, but got caught by a thorn and rolled around on the ground. "Quiet down, Fang," Cyrus gave it another spell to calm it down. The car was coming. "Car?" Ron's voice was choked with relief. "It's really our car." Harry and Ron followed Cyrus, stumbling toward the light, tripping all the way. After a while, they came to a clearing. Mr. Weasley's car was parked in the middle of a circle of dense trees, with densely intertwined branches and leaves on top. There was no one in the car, and the headlights glowed brightly. When Ron walked toward it with his mouth wide open, the dog slowly moved toward him, like a big turquoise dog greeting its owner. "It turns out it has always been here," Ron said happily, walking around the car. "Look at it, the forest has turned it wild." In the Muggle world, this is no different from being scrapped. But this car seems to have undergone some magical modifications. To be honest, it can still be driven. Cyrus was actually very interested. The existence of magically modified vehicles shows that technology and magic are not completely insulated. Maybe he can modify something else, such as the Gatling curse? He shuddered, this was too evil. The wings of the car were scratched and covered with mud. Fang didn't seem to be interested in it at all, it followed Harry every step of the way, looking cautiously at Cyrus, the terrible wizard who had cast 2 spells on it. Harry could feel it trembling. Now, Harry and Ron's breathing slowly calmed down again. We thought it was going to attack us. Ron said, leaning on the car and patting it, I never knew where it went. But Harry was in no mood to bother with the car right now. He squinted his eyes and continued to look for the shadows of spiders on the ground illuminated by lights, but they all hurriedly avoided the dazzling car lights and ran away without knowing where to go. We've lost track, he said, wanting to find a spider more than a car. Let's go, don't waste time here. But Ron suddenly stopped talking and didn't move. His eyes were fixed on the spot 10 feet above Harry behind him, his face was livid, and fear was vividly written on his face. It looks like we don't have to look for it anymore. Cyrus raised his wand and saw several huge acromantulas staring at them greedily. He originally wanted to destroy them directly, but after thinking about it he still didn't take action. Instead, he watched Harry and Ron being picked up by their waists with their huge jaws and hung in the air. He himself gave up resistance and allowed these monsters to drag them into the dark trees. And his reasons for going there are not righteous at all. Chapter 74, Aragog. Cyrus didn't know how long he had been in the animal's claws. All he knew was that the darkness seemed to suddenly recede a bit, and he saw that the ground covered with fallen leaves was now densely covered with spiders. He turned his neck and found that they had reached the edge of a wide hollow that had been cleared of trees. The dark clouds in the sky parted a bit, and the stars illuminated the horrifying sight. Spiders. They were not like those little spiders that hurriedly crawled through the fallen leaves below, but each one was as big as a cart horse, with 8 eyes and 8 legs, dark and hairy, and they were huge monsters. The giant spider holding Cyrus and the others walked down the steep slope towards a misty hemispherical spider web in the center of the depression, surrounded by its companions. After they saw what it was holding, they all excitedly moved their large claws and made a clicking sound. The spider released its claws, and Cyrus' wand flicked gently, landing smoothly on the ground like a cat. However, Harry and Ron didn't have this ability. The 2 of them plus a dog hit the ground at his feet heavily. Fang cowered in fear, as if he was pretending to be dead. Ron and Harry's mouths were wide open, as if they were screaming silently, and their eyes bulged outwards. Maybe it would be easier for him to pass out now than to be awake. Are you okay? Cyrus asked in a low voice. Fine. Harry managed to mutter. What do you think? We will die. Ron's voice was hoarse. At this time, the spider that brought them over made a loud noise, and Cyrus heard that it was actually speaking human language. The language was not easy to hear because the spider clicked and moved its large claws every time it spoke a word. However, as magical animals, acromantulas can speak and have considerable intelligence. Cyrus even suspected that they might be a little smarter than Hagrid. This could easily be classified as a demi-human. You must know that even the fire dragon cannot speak. Aragog. It shouted, Aragog. Cyrus looked intently and saw a huge spider very slowly emerging from the misty hemispherical spider web. It was even larger than the average acromantula, almost as big as an elephant. Its body and legs were black with grey, and each eye on its ugly head with big pincers was covered with a layer of white. It is blind. What's going on? It said, its 2 big claws moving rapidly, making a clicking sound. This is a very strange feeling, and Cyrus can't help but think that they are talking very fast, like some rappers from his old world. Human, said the spider that had just grabbed Cyrus. Is it Hagrid? Aragog said, coming closer, his 8 milky white eyes looking blankly. It's a stranger. Kill them, I'm sleeping. Aragog said irritably. He was already very old, and now his rest time far exceeds his activity time. A few unknown strangers are not worthy of him waking up. And it doesn't eat humans, these guys aren't even food to him. When the spiders around heard this, they couldn't hold it any longer. Every time Hagrid came here, their hearts longed for his flesh and blood, but their leader Aragog would not allow them to harm Hagrid. How ridiculous! Acromantulas will eat human flesh and blood while they are alive. Click, 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 spiders' claws were moving everywhere in the depression. Harry and Ron's hearts seemed to leave their chests and jump out of their throats. They subconsciously grabbed Cyrus, as if expecting Mr. Riddle to give them some courage. Cyrus did not disappoint them. He looked around at the spiders in the cave and counted their number. Facing so many monsters, Cyrus actually didn't feel any fear at all. But after all, they were spiders, and it still made him feel uncomfortable when he looked at them. He took a step forward and said calmly, "We're friends with Hagrid." The noisy spiders suddenly stopped, and Aragog also hesitated. "Hagrid has never sent anyone to our hollow before," it said slowly. "Hagrid is in trouble." Harry mustered up his courage, his breathing coming in ragged gasps. "That's why we're here." "Trouble?" said the old spider. Harry thought he could hear concern in the clicking of the claws. "But why did he send you?" Harry thought about standing up, but decided to stay on his stomach. He didn't think his legs could support the weight of his body. "Let me explain, Harry." Only Cyrus was still standing. He looked proudly at the spiders surrounding them. Although such a large number of spiders made him feel a little uncomfortable, it was not fear, just disgust. Harry was visibly relieved to hear Cyrus' words. "The Chamber of Secrets has opened again. They believe that Hagrid recently released something to harm the students. They took him to Azkaban." Cyrus briefly explained the situation, without mentioning his own affairs of course. He believed that if Aragog knew that he was Riddle, he would not be able to say a word, and his descendants would immediately pounce on him and bite him to death. Aragog moved his claws angrily, and the sound was echoed by the large group of spiders on the hollow ground. It was like applause, but this applause made people's hair chill and was nauseating. "But that was many years ago," Aragog said angrily. Many years ago. I remember it very well. It was because of that they took him out of school. They believed me to be that monster. But I didn't harm anyone. It was the monster that lived in what they called the Chamber of Secrets. They thought it was Hagrid who opened the Chamber of Secrets and let me out." "So, you didn't come out of the Chamber of Secrets?" Harry had a layer of cold sweat on his forehead, but he still couldn't help but ask. If what Aragog said was true, wouldn't it mean that Mr. Riddle was simply mistaken? Hagrid is indeed not the culprit, and the monster has nothing to do with Hagrid. He couldn't help but look at Cyrus, and found that Cyrus was also frowning at the moment, and he immediately breathed a sigh of relief. "Me?" Aragog said, his large claws opening and closing angrily, as if he wanted to bite something to death. "I was not born in a castle. I come from a faraway land. A traveller gave me to Hagrid before I hatched from the egg. Hagrid was just a child at the time, but he looked after me, hid me in a cupboard in the castle, and fed me crumbs scattered on the table. Hagrid was a good friend of mine, and he was a good man. It was he who protected me when I was discovered and held responsible for the death of a girl. I have been living in the woods ever since, and Hagrid comes to visit me often. He even found a house for me. I have a wife Mosag. You see how prosperous our family is, all thanks to Hagrid." Cyrus raised his head and looked around, unable to help but agree with its words. Thousands of acromantulas are actually the offspring of Aragog and Mosag. Sure enough, the reproductive abilities of the species raised by hybrid Master Hagrid are no joke. Of course, Cyrus naturally hopes that the number of them will be as large as possible. Only when the nutrients are sufficient can the fruits be abundant. Chapter 75, Spider Swarm Siege. Cyrus pretended to be suspicious and annoyed, and continued to ask. "So you never assaulted anyone?" "No," the old spider said resentfully, "I have this instinct, but out of respect for Hagrid, I have never hurt anyone. The body of the murdered girl was found in a bathroom. And I've never seen any part of the castle except the cupboard I grew up in. We spiders like darkness and silence." "But then, do you know what killed the girl?" Harry said, "Because whatever it was, it's back and attacking people now." Suddenly, there was a clicking sound, and countless long legs were moving rustlingly, huge black shadows were dangling around them. "That thing that lives in the castle," Aragog said, "is an ancient creature that we spiders fear most." "What is it?" Harry asked urgently, the truth coming before his eyes. The clicking sounds became louder and the rustling sounds became denser. The spiders seemed to be surrounding them, and the boys could sense them becoming very frightened and impatient. "We won't tell," Aragog said with emotion. "We won't tell its name. I didn't even tell Hagrid the name of that terrible creature, although he asked me many times. Harry didn't want to press the topic anymore, especially when spiders were gathering from all directions. Ron seemed to be about to faint. His face was whiter than the paint on the wall, and he squeezed Harry hard, showing an ugly expression of fear and pleading from his eyes. Aragog seemed not to want to speak. It slowly retreated into its hemispherical web. It seems like we can't ask any more questions, but hey, at least we still got some information, right? Cyrus said while staring at the spider. The spiders seemed to be unable to restrain themselves and moved towards them slowly, inch by inch. Yet. Then let's go. Harry also realized something was wrong. Wait. Why are the spiders coming towards us? Hey, Aragog. We can leave, right? Aragog. He shouted to Aragog desperately, while hearing the leaves rustling behind him. Ron seemed to hear redemption. Leave. Cyrus said slowly, I don't think it will let us leave like this. You're right, I think you guys shouldn't leave. Aragog's white eyes were still moving. He couldn't see anything, but he could still sense it. As it grows older, its control over the spider swarm is no longer what it used to be. Previously it was a matter of just one Hagrid and he too looked powerful to these spiders, but now these little kids are here. If Aragog blindly prevents the spider swarm from eating these humans who have fallen into the trap, it is very likely that the spider swarm will resist it. But... My sons and daughters obeyed my orders and did not harm Hagrid. But fresh human flesh was automatically delivered to their doorsteps, and I cannot stop them from enjoying it or else they would stop obeying me. Farewell, Hagrid's friends. Cyrus turned around. A few steps away, high above him, the spiders formed a solid, towering wall of iron and steel, their giant claws clicking together, and many pairs of eyes on those ugly black heads shining. Harry felt like he was drowning at the bottom of the sea, and he felt suffocated by countless spiders. Not to mention Ron, he seemed to be stupid and motionless, but even if he was good, I'm afraid he couldn't help, that wand couldn't do anything. Harry wanted to pull out his wand and fight the spiders to the death, but Cyrus held him down. Let me do it, you can find a chance to take Ron away. But... leave Mr. Riddle here alone? Harry looked at the endless spiders and immediately shook his head, but we can't leave you behind. Even Ron, who was so frightened that he had no strength at all, nodded. He was more worried about his sister. If Cyrus died here, what would Ginny do? He was using Ginny's body. Don't worry, the acromantula can't kill me yet. You guys should find a chance to leave first. That way, I don't have to worry about you when I escape. Cyrus now wants to separate from Harry and Ron, otherwise, how can he proceed with his seemingly, slightly sinister ritual? The acromantula wanted to eat them, so why didn't he want to exchange the life of the acromantula for his own rebirth? But Mr. R.I. Afraid I'm no match for them. Cyrus easily knocked away a spider as big as a car. Seeing Harry nod, he smiled and said, Don't worry, I was caught by them on purpose from the beginning. Otherwise, how can we find their lair? Harry and Ron were still hesitant. Okay, trust me. Ginny is also my friend. I would rather you two die than let her get hurt. What? All right. Although Harry agreed, he actually didn't know how to get out of there. There were so many of them that even though Cyrus kept knocking away the approaching spiders, they still surrounded the area. Room crying. At this time, a high-pitched and long voice suddenly sounded, and a dazzling light illuminated the entire depression. Mr. Weasley's car rumbled down the slope, its headlights flashing and its horn blaring, knocking the spiders aside. Several were knocked backwards, their long legs dancing in the air. Shrill stop. With a shrill sound, the car stopped in front of Harry and Ron, and the door flew open. Get inside, quick! Cyrus cleared the spiders around the car and pushed them into the car. Harry and Ron adjusted their postures with difficulty. Take this fang also! Cyrus yelled, grabbing the large hound that seemed to be wilted and throwing it into the back seat. The car door slammed shut. Ron didn't touch the accelerator, but fortunately, the car didn't require him to do anything. The engine roared to life and they set off. But the spiders couldn't just watch the food in their mouths escape, could they? They blocked the way. Many acromantulas looked bigger than cars, blocking the front like a hairy hill. Harry and Ron in the car were pale and didn't know what to do. At this time, a fierce red light suddenly lit up outside the glass, and then a loud noise was heard. The huge spider in front of them was blown into pieces, and the entire road was cleared. Harry and Ron in the car quickly turned around and saw Cyrus standing among the spiders, pointing his wand at the exit. Only now do they understand how powerful this Mr. Riddle who once showed off his talents is. Vroom. There was no obstacle, and the car sped up the slope and left the depression. Chapter 76, In Exchange for Life. Harry, Ron, and Fang were screaming while the car ran rampant through the woods. The car followed a route it was obviously familiar with, cleverly turning left and right, looking for the widest gap. They left the forbidden forest with no pursuers behind them. Harry turned to look at Ron and saw that his mouth was still open, as if he was screaming silently, but his eyeballs were no longer bulging. "Are you okay?" Ron stared straight ahead, unable to say a word. After waiting for a long time, he opened the car door and crawled into the pumpkin patch to vomit desperately. "Follow the spider," said Ron weakly, wiping his mouth with his sleeve. "I'll never forgive Hagrid. We're lucky to be alive. When he comes back from Azkaban, I will be the one to kill him." Ron fiercely pulled out the broken wand. "I bet he thought Aragog wouldn't hurt his friends," said Harry. "That's Hagrid's problem," Ron said, banging the wall of the hut hard. "He always thinks that monsters are not as bad as people make them out to be. Look at his fate. The one who is now imprisoned in Azkaban in the cell." He began to tremble uncontrollably. "What's the point of sending us there? I want to know, what did we find out?" "We found out that Hagrid never opened the Chamber of Secrets and that he is innocent," Harry said. Ron snorted loudly. Obviously, in his mind, Hagrid was no longer innocent just from the moment he hatched Aragog in the cupboard. Harry went to Hagrid's house and took back the invisibility cloak and put it on himself and Ron. The two of them found a place to sit next to each other, looking back into the depths of the Forbidden Forest, waiting for Cyrus. "If you ask me, it's a good thing Mr. Riddle wronged Hagrid 50 years ago," Ron said, "otherwise, Aragog would have been staying in a room in the school." "You saw it too. If Aragog doesn't eat humans then it's okay, but what about other spiders? I bet that as long as Hagrid doesn't pay attention, they will eat up all the students in the entire school immediately." Harry wanted to defend Hagrid, but he couldn't as he had just escaped from the mouths of those spiders. He himself was almost killed, and Mr. Riddle's life or death was still uncertain. The two of them could only sit here and wait, praying that Mr. Riddle was okay. But the wait was too long. That monster inside the chamber sounds so much like Voldemort that even the spiders dare not say its name," uttered Harry. Ron shuddered, "Then don't mention it, okay?" Harry sighed and looked up. The sky was not as dark as before. All the dark clouds seemed to have dispersed, and the moonlight shone on the empty pumpkin patch, as if it were covered with white frost. He fell tiredly into the pumpkin patch, and suddenly, he saw the sky light up deep in the Forbidden Forest. The firelight under the night sky shined into the sky as if a sun was rising. He stood up suddenly. "Ron, look over there. Inverse Protego Diabolica." He used one of the modified spells of the original spell. Cyrus watched the car's tail lights disappear into the darkness. Some spiders still wanted to chase Harry, but he cast a magic enchantment in reverse to cover the depression. The spiders rushed towards the invisible magic wall and were immediately burned to ashes by the magic. Therefore, they could only turn around and target Cyrus alone. Large tracks of spiders covered the undulating open space. There may be thousands or tens of thousands of acromantulas in front of Cyrus. The largest one was bigger than a car, and the smallest one was as big as a hound. They were like sharks that had smelled blood and rushed towards Cyrus like crazy. The densely packed spiders crowded each other, fearing that if they fell behind a little, they would miss the taste of human flesh. Hundreds of thousands of legs hit the ground, making a loud clicking sound, as if the entire Forbidden Forest was shaking with their footsteps. Even Cyrus, who is not afraid of spiders, had goosebumps all over his body. It was like knocking open a wooden cabinet and seeing hundreds of termite larvae piled up and squirming together. Or maybe entering and seeing that there are tens of thousands of snakes entwined together in a cave. The twisted body kept rising and falling in the gap, which was disgusting. But Cyrus did not kill them all at once. He pointed the tip of his wand downward and stabbed it hard towards the ground. Boom! In an instant, a powerful force of magic was released with him as the center of the circle, and the shock wave knocked away all the acromantulas that were about to approach and almost drowned him. An empty space is left. He slowly took out a crucible, and the potion in the crucible was still boiling. The spiders won't give up. They come one after another, like swarms of locusts. There are so many of them, but Cyrus's body is so small, each one is afraid that it won't be able to eat anything if it's too late. Those sharp spider legs stepped on the ground like nails, while the following spiders stepped on the spiders in front of them without mercy. They piled higher and higher, almost forming a high wall, becoming identical to an incoming black wave. Cyrus watched them die, and he lit the fire. The flames burned and suddenly exploded like gushing spring water, spreading to every corner. The acromantulas were caught off guard by the sudden spread of flames. The blazing fire waves collided with the black spider tide, and the fire mercilessly burned their limbs and flesh. They let out horrible wails, but the flames were like poison that they couldn't get rid of, and they spread quickly. The burning spiders were like monsters in the flames, struggling desperately. The spiders in front wanted to escape, but the spider swarm kept pushing them forward. The burning spider is like a devil in flames, rampaging through the spider group, and then passing the flames to more spiders. It only took a moment for the flames to ignite the entire depression. Isn't this a kind of passing on from generation to generation? Wait, human! Aragog wailed and begged Cyrus, but its plea fell on deaf ears. Not to mention the fact that Acromantula also wanted to kill them, it was enough for Cyrus to kill them ruthlessly. What's more, the value of life is equal only in alchemy. In a person's eyes, the life of a spider is obviously not the same as the life of a human. The flames continued to burn, taking away the bodies and souls of the spiders. Their bodies turned into ashes in an instant, and only the red liquid flowed towards the sky, converging into a bloody river above the crucible. The entire depression seemed to have suddenly turned into a cemetery of death and a spring of life. The spiders who were not yet dead were avoiding the flames in fear, but all their escape routes had been blocked by Cyrus with the ultimate protection. He was the only one in the flames who was not contaminated at all. In the sea of hot fire, Cyrus's eyes were colder than winter. In an instant, all the acromantulas became sacrifices for him to refine the magic stone. Life can only be measured by lives, and in exchange for tens of thousands of lives, this time, the red liquid left in the crucible became thicker and thicker, looking like a large pot of plasma. Chapter 77, Final Preparations. The blazing fire caught Harry and Ron's attention. Harry looked back at the castle nervously, wondering if the professors in the castle would notice anything unusual here. Ron's mind was filled with worries. The firelight in the sky dimmed the stars. The dark night on the other side of the horizon seemed to be boiled by water and turned orange-red. Mr. Riddle had not returned yet. After going through so many things, Ron's legs seemed to float up and turned into a wisp of smoke, but his head was very heavy. But at this moment, he seemed to have forgotten the horror of the Forbidden Forest and his fear of spiders. "No, Harry, I have to find her," Ron said decisively. "Mr. Riddle?" He didn't care, but Ginny, that was his sister. "Let's go." Harry ignored his physical exhaustion and didn't think that he had only escaped death for less than a few hours. He stood up with Ron without hesitation, took a deep breath, and looked determined. And with that, took another step towards the Forbidden Forest. But before the two of them reached the edge of the Forbidden Forest, they saw a small shadow emerging from the jungle. "Ginny!" Ron's heartbeat suddenly increased, as if he suddenly regained his vitality. Only at this moment did he truly feel that he was standing on the ground, with solid ground under his feet. He rushed towards the shadow, tripping over himself in his haste and rolling around in the mud. But this did not stop him from moving forward, and he rolled and crawled at Cyrus's feet. "What are you doing?" Cyrus didn't expect Ron to give such a gift as soon as they met and looked at him in surprise. "Are you okay, Ginny?" Not even a single hair was hurt. Cyrus didn't correct Ron's title. He just reached out and shook his hair to show that he was fine. "Those spiders refused to let me go, thinking that they could drag me to death because of their large number. So I just took a moment and killed them all." He said the words so lightly that both Harry and Ron felt a little frightened, so much so that the two silly children suddenly realized that they were less worried about each other than the spiders. "Killed them all? I bet Hagrid will be very sad when he gets out of prison." "Sad? Maybe he won't be sad if those spiders ate us," Ron complained. "It's almost dawn, let's go back quickly. Otherwise, it would be bad if the professors catch us." Harry put the invisibility cloak on Ron and Cyrus cast the spell. After returning to Gryffindor Tower, they didn't go back to their rooms and simply rested on the sofa in the common room. Cyrus fed Harry and Ron a large bottle of Vitamix potion each to cheer them up. Harry also took advantage of the time when others had not gotten up to tell Cyrus his guess. It was indeed Myrtle who was killed 50 years ago, but I'm afraid she doesn't have any clues, otherwise Hagrid's grievances would have been cleared long ago, Cyrus said apologetically after listening to Harry. Don't feel guilty. It's not your fault. Raising an acromantula in school is no better than raising another dangerous monster. Ron still has a lot of resentment towards Hagrid, but could he be blamed? Whoever encounters this kind of situation would find it difficult to forgive him. No matter what, I still have to try. Harry didn't want to miss the slightest chance. We were in that bathroom at that time, only 3 toilets away from her, and we couldn't even ask her. Ron said distressedly, now. These days, looking for spiders is enough for them. Now Harry wants to avoid the teachers when they are roaming the school and sneak into the girls' bathroom? It's simply impossible. Professor McGonagall almost prohibits students from going to any place that is not related to dormitories, classrooms, or auditoriums. Not to mention that the girls' bathroom they have to go to isn't somewhere else, but right next door to the scene of the first attack. We can use the invisibility cloak to get there at night, like today, Harry said. It's different inside the castle and outside the castle. And you can't wear an invisibility cloak to communicate with Myrtle, and she will definitely not be happy about it. Cyrus said, she is too sensitive and will cry and fuss over the smallest things. It'll draw the professors in. You know what they say, Harry, the culprit always comes back to the scene of the crime, and by then we've got nothing to say. Harry and Ron groaned simultaneously. Of course, Cyrus had a way for them to avoid the professor's eyes and communicate with Myrtle, but it wasn't possible yet. He still had the last bit of preparation to complete. After sacrificing the lives of so many acromantulas, the magic stone seems to have begun to take shape, but it will take some time for it to completely solidify. He will also look for opportunities to hide the unformed life in the crucible in the room of requirement, waiting for the moment of true transformation. And not for long. I'm afraid it won't be long before Tom takes action. Dumbledore stood on the edge of the Black Lake, looking at the ancient and huge castle shrouded in darkness from a distance. On the other side of the Forbidden Forest, the glimmer of morning light had slowly begun to drive away the darkness, and a faint mist shone in the forest. The sky is filled with darkness, but it will take some time for the sky to be completely bright. Dumbledore was waiting. It has been more than a month since he left Hogwarts, so it's not like he has done nothing. These days, he first visited the school directors and tried to persuade them to cancel the previous proposal. This was much easier than he thought, because the reason why several school directors agreed to Malfoy's proposal was not because they really wanted to drive him away, but because they were threatened by Malfoy and were forced to sign. Now, Dumbledore has obtained the documents in advance from the school directors agreeing to his continued position as principal, but he has not disclosed this matter, nor has he returned to Hogwarts. He was waiting for an opportunity to avoid alerting the enemy. And he believes that that time will come soon. Even though he himself was not at Hogwarts, Dumbledore still had various ways to obtain information on the school. Not to mention that 3 of the 4 head professors headed by Professor McGonagall were loyal to him. Even Snape had no reason to betray him and return to the embrace of the Dark Lord. Not to mention, in fact, the decision of the school board has no impact at all on the fact that he is the real headmaster recognized by the castle of Hogwarts. It looked like he had been driven away, but in fact, the institutions, portraits, and sculptures in the castle, were all loyal to him. What he said to Harry at that time, only when everyone here betrays me will I truly leave this school. He was not just referring to Harry alone. Now, Dumbledore is waiting for a signal. He believes that Tom Riddle's character will not give up, and the other party will definitely reveal his true face in the next attack. But before that, he still had one last preparation to make. He turned around, and the dawnlight rose behind him as if wrapped in a morning cloak. Chapter 78, Heading to the Secret Room. Ministry of Magic. When Fudge arrived to work at the Ministry of Magic, Dumbledore had already been waiting in his office for quite some time. "Ha! Dumbledore." Fudge was startled, as if a primary school student was afraid of meeting his head teacher. Why are you here?" He looked very uneasy and put his hat on the hanger very restrainedly. In the month since Dumbledore vanished, Fudge felt more relaxed than ever. There is no need to seek advice from the other party, all policies are decided by himself. To be honest, this is the first time since he took office for so long that he truly feels that he is the Minister of Magic. Before, he was more like Dumbledore's puppet. All this time has passed, and nothing seems to have gone wrong, right? Fudge didn't want to see Dumbledore come back. It would have been better for him without Dumbledore. Although it was Malfoy who drove away Dumbledore, Fudge himself was now the beneficiary. After seeing Dumbledore, he naturally felt a little guilty. "I've come to get a few things, Fudge. I want things related to Voldemort." Fudge's face paled a little, and he said tremblingly, "Don't mention that name, Dumbledore." Dumbledore said sternly, "I know that this name caused too much panic and death back then, but now, it is just a name. Fearing it will only intensify the fear itself, which does no good. I think we should talk about why you came here." Fudge skipped the topic with sweat on his forehead. Dumbledore could only continue, "I want to know, his wand should still be kept in the Ministry of Magic, right? No one came here to steal it, yes. The Ministry of Magic has a special department that is used to keep the wands of some criminals. Many of the wands belonging to the Death Eaters imprisoned in Azkaban are still in safe hands at the Ministry of Magic. The Ministry of Magic usually does not use broken wands as punishment for pure-blood wizards, because it is extremely easy for pure-blood wizards to get a new wand. Not everyone believes that the wand chooses the wizard. Yes, of course, that person's wand is kept the most closely guarded, but I just want to confirm, Fudge. Also," Dumbledore blinked, "I also want to pick up something for another student in advance. It still takes some craftsmanship and steps to condense the Fountain of Life into the Philosopher's Stone, but once the biggest problem is solved, the rest is nothing." 2 days before the mandrake fully matured, the red Fountain of Life in the crucible finally condensed into a bright red, but slightly turbid-looking, irregular prismatic stone. It looks like a small red crystal or a ripe pomegranate fruit. It finally worked. Cyrus held the magic stone with shiny eyes. The magic power contained in the stone was enough to refine endless elixirs, and it was even easier to turn a stone into gold. He gave it a try and instantly turned a table into gold. It wasn't just the outside, Cyrus cut open the table and the inside had also turned to gold. Then, he extracted a bottle of blood-red potion from the Philosopher's Stone and drank it in one gulp. As the hot red liquid flowed into his throat, Cyrus clearly felt that the magic of life began to spread inside Ginny's body, filling in the part of her life that was missing before. The Philosopher's Stone is really refined. However, it is still a mystery whether the magic stone can create a separate, healthy, and living body. Voldemort had tried to use the Philosopher's Stone, but it didn't work out. But Cyrus had no time to wait any longer. The afternoon before the mandrake matured, Harry and Ron found an opportunity to go to the bathroom. Cyrus did not want them to discover the location of the secret chamber at this juncture, let alone. "Hermione has something to say to me in the school doctor's office," he whispered, cast the disillusionment charm on himself, and held the Marauder's map tightly in his hand. By this time, his breathing was getting heavier. He knew it wasn't nervousness, but excitement. "McGonagall is patrolling on the 2nd floor. I need to make a noise to lure her there." Cyrus walked quickly in the castle, and when he turned the corner on the 4th floor, he met Lockhart, who was fiddling with his hair and walking back to the office. Then he saw Harry and Ron sneaking away from the Gryffindor team and turning into a path. "Wouldn't it be better if we took Mr. Riddle with us?" he heard Ron whisper to Harry. "I mean, he and Myrtle are students of the same era. Maybe Myrtle will open her heart a little more when she meets someone who has been through the same thing as herself." "But we are too late," Harry reminded, "Ginny is not in the same class as us." "You're right," Ron said. "They didn't even have a chance to go back and get the invisibility cloak." Cyrus passed the two of them, and suddenly Harry paused and glanced back. He seemed to see a familiar shadow, and there seemed to be a strange feeling in his heart. It seemed that at this moment, he had just missed his fate. But there was nothing there, just a ray of sunlight shining in, and the dust beating softly in the empty corridor. "What's wrong, Harry?" Ron asked. "It's nothing, let's go." The two of them didn't dare to wait too long, but Cyrus turned the corner and deliberately made a noise, attracting McGonagall. "Mr. Potter! Mr. Weasley! What are you doing?" Professor McGonagall pursed her lips into a straight line and looked at the two of them sternly. "May I know where you two seem to be going?" "Ah! We were going," Ron stammered. "We want to go see Hermione," Harry said. Ron and Professor McGonagall both looked at him. "We haven't seen her for a long time, Professor." Harry stepped on Ron's foot and said in one breath, "We just wanted to sneak to the hospital wing and tell her that the mandrakes were about to grow, even if she is petrified, we wanted to assure her not to worry." Cyrus heard that McGonagall was so moved by the two of them that she almost cried. He moved on and lifted the disillusionment spell at the door of the bathroom. He looked up at the wall of the corridor. The writing he left last time was still there, as if no one in the entire castle could clean it up. He left the second message there. Her skeleton will lie in the Chamber of Secrets forever. The bright red text seemed to be written in blood, stinging everyone who saw it with fear. Chapter 79, Secrets and Lies Resurrected. Cyrus walked into the bathroom. Are you here again? Myrtle happened to be in the bathroom today. She didn't look happy, tilting her head and staring at Ginny. She didn't like this little girl who was prettier than her. You can be quiet, Myrtle. Cyrus pointed the wand at her and raised it slightly. Silencio. Nconf undo. Myrtle immediately seemed not to see him and got back into the toilet where she usually stayed. Cyrus walked quickly to the faucet that did not produce water, opened his mouth, Oaspin, and spoke the language of snakes, and the secret room was opened. He walked through the long, slimy slide, walked through the muddy stone tunnel covered with rat carcasses, and opened the second door in snake language. In the process, Cyrus deliberately freed Ginny's soul. At this moment, the little girl was watching with tears in her eyes as Cyrus finished everything and finally stepped into the long, dimly lit room. She seemed to be a separated soul, like a player who couldn't control her character and could only passively watch everything Cyrus was willing to show her. A room with stone pillars carved with many entangled snakes. The stone pillars towered up to support the ceiling that melted into the darkness above, casting long and strange black shadows on the entire room that was filled with green and mysterious light. Even from a third-person perspective, Ginny still felt unusually frightened. But it was Cyrus himself who grieved her even more. Scammed. Betrayed. Used. These three words flashed sadly through Ginny's mind. The truth was revealed, Mr. Riddle was the real successor. Whether it was the attack 50 years ago or the attack now, it was all caused by him. What a shame that he actually followed me seriously to find the culprit. Presumably at that time, Mr. Riddle must be laughing at my stupidity in his heart, right? You finally discovered it. Cyrus easily read Ginny's thoughts, and he slowly moved forward between the stone pillars coiled with giant snakes. Every step he took produced a hollow, loud echo among the ghostly walls. He had always had an expressionless face, or rather, Cyrus's expression had always been solemn, as if he was performing some terrible ritual. The empty eye sockets of rows of stone snakes on both sides seemed to have been watching him, like loyal and respectful courtiers. When he reached parallel with the last pair of stone pillars, a statue as tall as the room itself loomed before him, clinging to the dark wall behind. It was an old, monkey-like face, with a long sparse beard that almost reached the hem of the wizard's robe carved out of stone, and two large grey feet standing on the smooth floor of the room. This is the sculpture of Salazar Slytherin. Mr. Riddle. Ginny cried sadly. Now, she found that she had some control over her body. Although she couldn't control her actions, her facial expressions were fully displayed, revealing a crying face. Mr. Riddle, I thought we were friends. I won't deny that, Ginny. Cyrus seemed to be withdrawn from Ginny's body. The translucent silver threads separated from Ginny's body like a spray of mist, intertwining another form in front of her. Making a phantom. He looks handsome, gentle, and more attractive than any boy in the school. However, maybe the more such a person is, the more he knows how to make good use of his own advantages. I'm very grateful for your trust. If it weren't for you, I might still be in the diary. Cyrus was very happy in his heart, but when he saw Ginny's sad expression, he felt a little heavy. To be honest, he really regarded Ginny as a friend, and he had never thought of harming Ginny. If the Philosopher's Stone was not successfully refined, he would also put Ginny in the secret room and wait for Harry to come to rescue her, while he himself would leave with a body that has not yet been fully resurrected. Fortunately, with the magic stone fully refined, he can do more. But now, as a friend, he has to give this reckless little girl one last piece of advice. You lied to me. Ginny roared angrily, like a mad lioness, we believed you. We thought you would find the culprit with us. But you. I cheated you, yes. Cyrus showed a mysterious smile. We all grow up with secrets and lies, Ginny. He said softly. I believe that through this time, at least you should know that you should never trust a thoughtful thing. You should know that you should not open your heart to a magic item easily. Remember, keep the secrets to yourself and the lies, give others. Cyrus was like a gentle teacher, but the next moment his face changed. The premise is that you can survive today. Of course, he couldn't really kill Ginny. He just deliberately threatened Ginny so that Ginny could remember this lesson more deeply. This little lion was too reckless, and he was worried that Ginny would believe in anything with thoughts in the future. Ginny felt unusual pain. As if something was being pulled out of her body, from the inside of her blood vessels, from the depths of her bone marrow, from the most secret place in her heart. A/N, no no no. Don't break her heart like that, you fucking MC. Her consciousness gradually became confused, and her vision began to become blurry. She could only see the shadow of Mr. Riddle, which was not so real at first, but when she looked at him, she found that the distance between the two people was getting farther and farther. There was only a vague and indifferent face in a heavy darkness. Ha! Her vision went dark, and her petite body fell forward. Cyrus took a step forward and caught Ginny before she fell to the ground. Then, he took out a turbid red crystal. The life force flows in the stone. The powerful magic power in the magic stone was completely released at this moment. The blood-colored magic power was like a dye, immediately dyeing the silver threads with its own color after touching them. Cyrus first placed the Philosopher's Stone on Ginny's chest. The power of the Philosopher's Stone restored Ginny's lost vitality during this period. Her pale face turned rosy by the magic of the magic stone, and her beautiful red hair was like a burning flame, full of youth and vitality. She looked like she was sleeping peacefully at the moment, immersed in a sweet dream. Cyrus looked at her calm face and said sorry in his heart. Then, he raised his head and swallowed the magic stone as big as a baby's fist. The hot Philosopher's Stone became his heart, and every beat transmitted the power of life to every corner of his body. The gushing magic power intertwined into a dense network of blood vessels, condensing into bones and muscles. He is resurrected. Ding! Congratulations to the host for finally taking a fresh breath of air in a body that only belongs to himself after successfully resurrecting. Previous perks: Tom Riddle's memories, Tom Riddle's magic talent. New perk added, diary entry. Chapter 80, The Second Dumbledore. Cyrus greedily breathed the moist air inside the Chamber of Secrets. To be honest, the smell here is not that pleasant. The air smells like it has been rotten for 1,000 years. But for Cyrus now, it's the smell of life itself. He enjoyed it for almost a minute, during which he did nothing, not even conjuring up a suitable piece of clothing for himself. But soon, he woke up from his intoxication. Those who have traveled 100 miles didn't celebrate at 90.5, and now is not the time to celebrate for him. He looked at the floating transparent panel in front of him. This was the thing he had seen after his soul transmigrated into the diary. A new perk, hey? New perk added, diary entry, only usable after the host's death. After my death? Does that mean it will trap my soul in the diary after I die? No, I don't want to go through all this process once again, and who knows if Harry or Dumbledore will destroy the diary before a future little wizard finds it. Cyrus shuddered. He has finally been resurrected, and he has a lot of things to experience. He doesn't want to think about dying right now. Let's think about this perk after I have managed to escape this place. He thought. He conjured a piece of clothing for himself, which was exactly the same as what Riddle wore in his memory 50 years ago, and then took out the Marauder's map from Ginny's pocket. On the map, the name Minerva McGonagall walked to the door of the bathroom, stayed briefly, and then left in a hurry. Cyrus imagined the stern female professor's panicked expression after seeing the words on the wall. She panicked and helplessly spread the news to the ears of all professors and students, and then prepared to close the school. Maybe she'd even try to contact Dumbledore? But no matter what, Dumbledore's name has not yet appeared in the castle. When he thought of Dumbledore, Cyrus had a bad feeling in his heart. The old man put too much pressure on him, and Cyrus was always worried that something would happen. Fortunately, you can't go wrong with the Marauder's map. I remember that in the original book, Dumbledore returned to the castle during the time when Harry went to the Chamber of Secrets. Maybe I still have time to get the invisibility cloak. The power of Harry's invisibility cloak seems to be a little worse than the other two Deathly Hallows, but it is still a treasure. What worries Cyrus even more is the legend: a person who possesses 3 Deathly Hallows is equivalent to controlling death. The only person who possesses these 3 treasures at the same time is Harry Potter in the original book. In fact, he did come back from the dead and returned to reality from the King's Cross Station of the Soul. What if I also collected 3 Deathly Hallows? What a coincidence! Cyrus happened to know the location of these 3 sacred artifacts and also knew how to obtain them. Without much hesitation, he immediately turned around and spoke in Parseltongue to the statue of Slytherin, "Speak to me, Slytherin, the greatest of the 4 houses at Hogwarts." Slytherin's huge stone face moved, and its mouth opened wider and wider, eventually forming a huge black hole. Something moved in the statue's mouth. Something rustled upwards from the depths of the statue. A huge basilisk, with a green body and a bright light unique to poisonous snakes, with a body as thick as an oak tree trunk. It stretched its upper body high into the air, and its big flat head wandered randomly between the stone pillars as if it was drunk. Finally, the basilisk slowly swam in front of Cyrus, waiting for his order. "Your size is a bit too big. It's better to be smaller." Cyrus pressed his wand against the basilisk's body and cast a superb shrinking spell. The huge basilisk immediately turned into a small snake only 1 finger thick under his magic power, and then followed his arm and hid in Cyrus' sleeve. Then Cyrus left the chamber. While walking in the corridor, McGonagall's voice, amplified many times by magic, began to echo in the castle. All students returned to their respective house dormitories immediately. All teachers returned to the staff lounge. "Please act immediately." The students crowded out, and Cyrus disappeared into the crowd, cast a disillusionment charm, and followed everyone towards the tower in the corner of the 7th floor. The students were panic-stricken and uneasy. "Fred, George, do you know what happened?" Lee Jordan pushed aside the crowd, as if he was being carried forward by the waves. "What else could it be?" The twins shook their shoulders at the same time. Cyrus followed them into the Gryffindor Tower, where Percy and a prefect began to count people, mainly the girls. But the further he counted, the paler his face became. Ginny was gone. Cyrus walked into the men's dormitory with ease, found Harry Potter's bed, and quickly obtained the invisibility cloak. It's so easy that it almost feels a bit dreamy. He immediately put on his invisibility cloak and left the tower. The sky began to get dark. Cyrus passed by the mirror on the 4th floor, passed through the statue of the One-Eyed Witch on the 3rd floor, walked out of the castle gate, and picked a few mandrake leaves as he passed by the greenhouse. Finally, he arrived near the Whomping Willow. From here one could see the castle and the Black Lake, and the castle seems to be glowing under the golden sunset. But this fire will soon dim and disappear, and eventually, everything will be shrouded in darkness. Cyrus slowly walked in front of the Whomping Willow and touched the scar with his wand before the Whomping Willow found him. The irritable willow tree immediately fell silent. In this way, Cyrus, wearing the invisibility cloak, leaned on the tree trunk, looking down at the traces of traffic on the Marauders map with the last remaining fire of dusk. He saw teachers separating in the staff room and going to their own offices or houses. Professor McGonagall took the 3 Weasleys to her office in the Gryffindor lounge. The headmaster's office was still empty, and Dumbledore's name had not yet appeared anywhere. Dumbledore wasn't back yet, but Harry and Ron were already taking action. They found Lockhart, and the 3 of them stayed in the Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom for a long time. Finally, Lockhart was forced to follow them to the bathroom. Then, their traces disappeared from the Marauders map. Almost half an hour later, Dumbledore's name appeared in Professor McGonagall's office together with Molly Weasley and Arthur Weasley. Cyrus stood up suddenly, breathing a little faster. Dumbledore appears, just like in the original novel, he appears in the school, and the Whomping Willow is the furthest escape route from him. Hogwarts cannot disapparate, and Fawkes will be sent by him to help Harry. By the time Dumbledore realizes something is wrong and comes back to find him, Cyrus would have already fled. It's time to leave. Goodbye, Dumbledore. The sun has completely set. A few not-so-bright stars shone in the dark blue sky. Cyrus grabbed the tree trunk with one hand and jumped lightly into the hidden cave under the willow tree. He walked for a long time, and the tunnel began to slope upward. After a while, after turning a corner, a little light came in, and he immediately knew that he was about to reach the exit. This room was a disordered mess with peeling wallpaper, stained floors, and broken furniture as if someone had smashed it. The windows were boarded up. The Shrieking Shack, the transformation place specially prepared for Lupin at Hogwarts, has been considered a terrifying haunted house by wizards for more than 10 years. In theory, it is the safest place. But that doesn't seem to be the case tonight. Cyrus's face turned pale under the invisibility cloak, and he looked in horror at the white-bearded old man standing by the window with the moonlight behind him. It's Dumbledore. But why is Dumbledore here? Cyrus hurriedly lowered his head and glanced at the Marauders map again. On the map, Dumbledore's name was still glaring in Professor McGonagall's office. There are 2 Dumbledores?
Thanks for listening.